Under consent actions, first reading, item number 4, that is actually an informal resolution requiring one reading, so it encouraged the board to take items 2 and 3 as a first reading, but approve item 4 separately as an informal resolution and not set for a public hearing as it's an informal resolution. And then a note on land use public hearing items 5 and 6. Lance will be requesting a continuance on, primarily because the public notice wasn't posted in a timely manner for those tower sites, and so we need to get those posted properly, and so Lance will be coming in with a, I think, proposed continuance on those two. But other than that, there's no additions or deletions, just as
George?
So John, whose responsibility is that for the posting, for the public notice?
It's the applicants.
That's the applicants, yeah. Not ours.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this time, I will open the public comment part of our meeting. Anybody in the audience wishing to make public comment on items not on our agenda, they may do so. Just come forward, state your name for the record, and try to limit this to about 3 minutes per individual.
Okay, I'm going to first introduce myself, Jan Hamilton, and I'm going to pass around something I'd like for each of you to take one of these. It's a mustard seed, and if you know the story of the mustard seed, it means if we have the faith the size of a mustard seed, that we can make change. And I don't know if my letter to the editor this week has been printed yet. Has it? Has anybody seen it?
I haven't seen it.
I brought a copy because I think it would summarize my yearning as a grandmother to make a statement in our county, our city, our state, our nation, and our world. And it's about homophobia. Probably many of you know that I'm already making a stand for that. This letter to the editor says, deaths, suicides, and murders in the LGBT community in Aspen. And I quote what I said on Sunday when I sent this in. We consider our community to be open and accepting of the LGBT community. But are we really embracing their love for another person of the same gender to the degree that they truly feel the absence of bias and prejudice with zero homophobia? Are they being treated as second-class citizens? I could say we, because I'm a lesbian. The agony felt by people who love another person of the same gender, who are harassed, abused, and told that they cannot enter certain places of business in Aspen or that they must attend classes to be cured, is sexual orientation discrimination. Unless we truly accept LGBT families with equal human rights, the blood of those who die is on our hands. We invite you to embrace this motto with us. There is nothing love cannot face. There is no limit to its faith, its hope, and its endurance. The motto of the National Center for Lesbian Rights is the audacity to fight for justice, the perseverance to win. Would Matthew Shepard have lived if his hometown had been Aspen? What churches would he and his partner, James Bird, be welcome to attend in Aspen? Does God love LGBT and straight people the same? The question, what did Jesus say about same-gender families? Does anybody know the answer to that? I asked a very learned scholar from Duke University, and his answer was nothing. There's nothing in the Bible that Jesus directly stated against LGBT. The U.S. Supreme Court approved same-gender marriages on June 26, 2013. Governor John Hickenlooper signed into law same-gender civil unions on March 26, 2013. Yet only one church in Aspen is welcoming same-gender civil unions, the Aspen Community Methodist Church. On Saturday, this is very emotional for me, January 18th, during Gay Lesbian Ski Week, the ceremonies were held in the lobby of a hotel. Will Colorado be the 20th state to allow full-blown marriage for LGBT families? A lesbian couple I met in 1957 in Plainview, Texas, national champions in the girls basketball, captains of the Wayland Baptist University basketball team, have been together for 57 years in Denver. But at this time, they cannot be married and go through their remaining aging years as a married couple. Is the blockage of their marriage the unconditional love that Christians say we stand for? America is now turning a page in history. The African community voted the unexplained deaths to be our #1 concern. I'm not sure who conducted that survey, but I saw it in the paper. The Aspen Police Department cannot do this alone. Do we have, well, that's blocked out, the answer, and what is our answer to refusing to acknowledge that same-gender families have the same right as all others? Each individual will decide, one heart at a time. God bless. So if there's any time left, I'd just like to ask what the county's current philosophy is on how we're going to deal with this, and if we have a plan of action, I'd like to hear what it may be. If we don't have a plan of action, I would like to request that one be initiated and that we share that in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you, Jen. It's during the public comment, it's not really appropriate to get into a discussion. It's kind of getting public comment, bringing things from commissioners to the county staff to move on something. I will say one thing that you may or may not be aware of. The last time you spoke in front of us, you left after your public comment. The first item on our agenda that day was changing our human resource guidelines to allow civil union benefits pursuant to the state statute and the laws that were changed in 2013, as you mentioned.
Thank you.
So we are not oblivious to it here as the county. So we will take your information and move forward from there and contact you on those things. So.
Well, I just want to close by saying thank you. And I have no negative perceptions about what is happening or not happening. I'm just concerned about the deaths and the suicides that we're all concerned about, and I share
Absolutely.
your wishes for a wonderful county and state.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you, Jen. Anybody else wishing to make public comment at this time may do so. Glenn Horn, would like to come up, just state your name for the record. And
thank you. My name is Glenn Horn, Little Annie resident, and I'm here on behalf of the Little Annie's Homeowner Association, as well as virtually every other property owner and resident in Upper Little Annie that are above the Homeowner Association boundaries. And I know you guys are aware of what's taking place in Little Annie, the wedding that's going to occur up there on Saturday. And it's just over the top in terms of anything that's ever happened in Little Annie. You're looking at 27,000 square feet of tent space that's built on scaffolding. They've erected scaffolding to make the area flat. I'm not sure whether a place at 10,500 feet will ever revegetate, seeing there's no water source up there to revegetate the natural vegetation. I don't know how the ground's going to recover. Additionally, what you've got going up there is there's no construction management plan, there's no traffic control, there's been no notification to neighbors of what's going on, there's no dust control, there's no erosion control, there's no access plan for the people that are accessing the site every day to work. Just last Friday, our neighbor Pete Stouffer counted 50 large truck trips up Little Annie Road on a primitive road. Above hurricane, it's rated for 10 to 25 vehicle trips per day. So these were huge trucks, forklifts, and what it's brought about is the identification of a critical code problem. And I want to compliment the county staff because they're all over what the problem is. There are problems with the rural and remote zone. There's problems with the special event permitting. And we want to thank them for being on top of this and preparing a schedule to address these code problems. And we're fully supportive of what's being done by the county to address this issue.
I'm Randy Gold, also a Little Annie resident, and wanted to just add a couple other things. Glenn's keyed on it. I mean, there's a big gap in the code, which is really kind of astounding when we think about how much time and energy and thought went into establishing rural and remote to begin with. This event, the impact that this is creating in a 2-week time frame is considerably more than we experienced during the whole sun deck construction on Aspen Mountain. It's an incredible health and safety problem. There have been literally hundreds of truck trips up and down Little Annie Road already. The event is this week. They want another week to take everything down. And supposedly there's another event scheduled on June 21st. As Glenn said, I mean, the road's rated for 25 trips a day. When one of these big vehicles is on the road, you can't get past it. These are guys from Denver that are coming up. They don't even typically drive on roads like this. Some of these trucks have Jake brakes. So the situation is really, really out of control. The other issue that we're very concerned about is the event management itself. There's nothing that's been discussed with us. The only suggestion that they've made about how they're going to get guests, I don't know how many guests are going to be attending a 27,000 square foot tented structure, but my guess is 500 to 1,000 people. How are they going to get them there? What they're saying is that transportation is going to come via the sun deck, and then they're going to transport from there. Well, there's snow on the road between the sun deck and this event. So are they going to plow it? Because if they do, that's not permitted in rural and remote either. And if they're not, then are they all coming up Little Annie Road? And how are they going to do that? There's been no discussion about the event management. And the other thing that concerns me is, are they going to close off the road to the public? The public road runs right through this event venue. And if you're up hiking with your dog, or you're in a Jeep or a mountain bike or whatever, their guards are going to keep you off of the public road. Again, no discussion, no communication, and there wouldn't have been at all had Glenn not tried to initiate some contact with the person that's having the event. And of course, the big question that I'm asking myself, and maybe there's good reason for it, maybe not, why didn't they just have this at the sun deck? You know, there's no way that this came about in the last month. They've probably been planning this event for a year. And I'm sure that with the amount of money that's being rumored to be spent here, they could have done anything they wanted and had much less impact on everyone concerned by having this at the sun deck. And I don't know, there may be a good reason why it wasn't, but we're all incredibly put out, concerned, agitated, everyone that's on the backside of the mountain. This is just an untenable situation, and it's really been, as Glenn said, totally over the top. And we hope that with that staff is taking the ball here, and again, hopefully special event permitting, and now temporary commercial use, which is an allowed use in rural and remote, hopefully that'll get reclassified as a special review use, and any special event that happens will get classified as a special review use, so that the county's got a lot more jurisdiction and that something like this does not happen again. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just one thing that I want to add out of courtesy to the people that are getting married up there. I have been in contact with the family, and they did make an effort to get a water truck on the road, and it was there this morning at our request, and they are watering the road. But prior to that, the dust was so bad that Jordan Greengrass, one of the residents up there, said that he couldn't be outside in his yard without wearing a dust mask over the weekend. So it's really a health safety issue that's occurring up there. But to their credit, they did get a water truck out there when we asked.
Thank you. Michael?
Who is putting on the wedding?
Robert Steele, who's the new head of the Institute, in a
Is he
maybe a
getting-
short-sighted, not particularly.
Is he getting married or?
It's his daughter.
His daughter.
His daughter's.
And of course, the land is owned by John Miller and CCI, and there was, you know, again, no notification, no anything, really. Had we not really tried to initiate some sort of response and action, they would have preferred that this whole thing just was totally under the radar. If you can have a 27,000 square foot tent on the top of Aspen Mountain under the radar.
Rachel?
I would like perhaps to ask Cindy Hubin, our planning director, to give a little bit of why and how this has happened and why the county is not able to take the actions that we all would like to regarding this, because I think we need the background for the public since we're on TV here.
And just as a point of order, I don't know, John, if this is something that's more appropriate to kind of put into open discussion as opposed to the public comment section of this. I know it's a big issue that needs to be addressed, but so are a lot of the issues that people bring in front of public comment. And
Yeah, I think that's up to the board. We were anticipating during open discussion today to talk to the board about our thoughts on following up with code amendments and how we see that process moving forward. As far as an explanation of how we got to this point, we could do that now at the board's discretion or do that during the open discussion portion. I think that would be up to the board.
yes, yeah, I guess because there might be more people in the audience that are here, and I don't want to have to require them to come back. I do want to throw out the reassurance that we are planning to discuss this long-term solutions in our open discussion process. But maybe, Cindy, if you can give a moment or two of how we got to where we are and where we might move forward in our open discussion, and quickly in the meetings afterwards where we're going to make some changes.
Right, I'll be coming back at open discussion this afternoon if anybody wants more details. But the process basically is that in the land use code, you're required to have a special events commercial temporary use permit for a gathering such as this in the rural and remote zone district. But when the applicants or to-be applicants had approached us and explained the magnitude of this event, we as staff thought that it did not meet the intent of the zone district and therefore said you're welcome to apply. However, we as staff will recommend denial. The applicants proceeded to take another tactic and went to the landowner directly and got permission to use the property as a private party venue. Therefore, we had no jurisdiction over the event at all. We see this as a terrible loophole. Really apologize to all the people on the backside of Aspen Mountain and in rural and remote who have complied for the last 20 years with incredible regulations in an incredible setting. And this has been really tough for us to take as staff, so we are preparing an emergency, or as quickly as we can, an ordinance to come and fill this loophole in the land use code.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn.
All right, thank you.
George?
I just want
George,
to
yeah,
make
sorry.
a comment. We don't live there, but I share your distress about this. I am as upset about this situation as you are. Our staff is as well. And it brings to mind the concept to me of the ugly American. And that phrase came into being when tourists would go abroad to other countries, and rather than trying to understand and respect those countries, those communities' values, they would just bring their own values with them. And so they were known to be disrespectful, not courteous, really not even trying to understand how different countries view and work with one another. And so I use that as an analogy that here it's unfortunate that people come to our county, our town, because of our beauty, our pristine mountains, our landscapes, our clean air, our clean water. And then they bring their values with them, unfortunately, along with that, not understanding, not respecting, not caring about the values that we hold dear as a community. And so I guess you don't have to be an ugly American to be abroad. You could be an ugly American in our country, and that's unfortunate.
Rachel?
Yeah, I can only echo George's comments, and I think he made them very diplomatically. This is so far from being neighborly that I just can't even understand it. You know, maybe sometimes people have a wedding anniversary private party on their property, and they go and tell their neighbors, you know, and they'd invite their neighbors and say, you know, we're going to have some people parked a little extra this week. And our county hasn't thought that we needed to put in regulations for private parties and private events on a private property. But when you get to the magnitude of this, it's hard for me to think of it as a wedding and not just a tacky Kardashian spectacular. I mean, these are multi-millions of dollars being spent to try to stage something as if it's in a ballroom when it's over 10,400 feet in the backcountry on a primitive road in an alpine meadow that will be destroyed. I mean, I just choke to think that this is where the Aspen idea of body, mind, and spirit has gone to. And, you know, I wish it had come to us sooner in a way that we could have found some ways to stop the event from happening and be in a proper venue like the Sun Deck or the Institute grounds or any number of other wonderful spots that weddings are held at in this community all the time. And, you know, I think at least I believe it's a position, and it should be, that all existing noise regulations and lighting regulations that we have within the county will be enforced upon this property at the time of this wedding. And I believe that's no light emanating from the property after a certain period of time, as well as the standard noise violations. And if that's all we can do at this time, then that's it. But I hear the words that there might be a second special event. I'd like to know more about that. Is it planned on the same property? Is it?
What we've been told.
You know.
Staff has not been made aware of anything.
You know, I think that we may need to have some sort of emergency ordinance on rural and remote activities, even though I don't want to impinge on the neighbors who aren't doing this. And I think that it's going to take collaborative discussion with you guys to be able to find out what's fair, what allows for what might be more normal, routine, occasional social gatherings of neighbors and friends, as opposed to a 27,000 square foot tent space and chapel space above the height limits of any normal building, breaking ridge lines, destroying alpine meadows, everything that's been listed here. It's just unbelievable. And it's the premise that no money is exchanging hands for the use of this space, so it's not a commercial event.
Yeah, reportedly.
Reportedly. I'm just blown away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we will be discussing this more in our open discussion at the end of today's agenda, and probably in the next week to come on, probably at least in our next work session next week as well, but, yeah.
If I may, I would like to make sure next week's Tuesday meeting is noticed for a special session so that we may be able to take action on an emergency ordinance.
They have to go through planning commission stuff.
If we could revisit this during open discussion, I think there's more that needs to be discussed
Yeah.
process-wise.
And I believe for an emergency ordinance, we just need to call a special meeting. I'm not sure how it needs to be noticed, but we'll discuss it during our open discussion.
Okay.
Anybody else? We're still in our public comment section of our agenda. Anybody else wishing to make public comment at this time may do so. Seeing none, I will close the public comment and move to commissioner comments at this time. Any commissioners having comments? Steve.
I took advantage of the invitation to the Hobby Farms preschool open house over the weekend in Basalt. And there were tons and tons of families with young little kids there, all having a great time, and it was their first opportunity to see the property. They've done an amazing job of, fixing the house up, and they have just a wonderful facility there for preschoolers. They just received the state permit.
That's
for-
Miss
for the
Mayer?
bigger, yes, for the bigger preschool. They don't have all the work isn't done yet, like the septic part of the equation isn't done yet, so they're not open for business yet as a preschool, but it will be a wonderful facility. And it's this little enclave right next to Myers Metal and the Shell Station and all these townhomes and things and it just is very peaceful and quiet, and would be a wonderful place for anybody to send their preschooler to school. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Steve. Rachel?
Yeah, I'll be brief to say that, Independence Pass Foundation held a 25th anniversary party last night at the St. Regis as well. And they were celebrating 25 years of restoring high alpine erosion and road problems and damage. And it was great to see so many of the community turn out who've been either volunteers for the event or constant donors over the decades. And very much a tribute to Bob Lewis in founding the Independence Pass Foundation. And they had the new book released, The High Road to Aspen, by our local artist and photographer, David Heiser, and Paul Anderson. Yeah, sorry, I was just drawing. I knew Anderson, but I saw it. And it was really nice to see, and it's just a very interesting contrast right now with the work that we do to preserve the land and what we just heard earlier.
Other commissioner comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to an emergency ordinance.
Mr. Chair, I
Yeah.
live within 500 feet of this property. I need to recuse myself from your discussions of it.
Sounds good. We'll get you when we're done. First on our agenda is emergency ordinance authorizing a 50-year ground lease of lands underlying the Common Grounds Housing Subdivision. Johnny Ely is here to present that.
Rob and the remainder of the commission, as noted in the agenda item summary, the county is the owner of the parcel of land that is located under the improvements commonly known as Common Ground Affordable Housing Condominium Complex. The county has owned the property for a number of years and preceded in ownership to the development of Common Ground. Common Ground was developed and the realization of a community-driven effort to provide additional affordable housing on the site after county uses had relocated to other locations in the community. And this goes back to originally the hospital and then the county Department of Human Services that was located there for a while. The project was developed in conjunction with a lease that was conveyed by Pitkin County for a period of 50 years to allow Pitkin County to maintain ownership of the property, but to allow Common Ground to proceed with their development aspirations and then to, following the development and utilization of the property for affordable housing, to then manage the affordable housing complex. This has proceeded now for a number of years, and currently there are only 29 years left on the current lease. The reason I mentioned the time left on the lease is because the standard time of an average mortgage is for 30 years, and typically a lender will not extend a loan on property that is subject to a lease that is not at least as long as the life of the loan, for obvious reasons. The discussion that has taken place on and off for the last couple of years has revolved around whether it is in the best interest of the county and the public and of the residents of Common Ground to either renew the lease or to convey the property outright to Common Ground. Up to this point, the discussion has concluded with the county expressing through the board that the best approach would be to maintain ownership of the property and preserve for the county and for the public the ability to change use of the property or to more actively manage or to otherwise participate in the active use of the property, although nothing is anticipated currently that would change the use and the occupancy of the property at any level. The lease extension, what is offered for the board for consideration now, is to take forward a 50-year extension of the lease, and it is offered as an emergency ordinance because although the discussion has proceeded for the last or a little bit more, 2 years now, during that period of time there has not been any pending transactions of any of the units out there, or any attempts, at least that implicated the lease, to refinance any of the units. But now there is. And APCHA is taking a potential transaction forward with a hoped-for closing date of next Monday. And when we were informed of that, we set the matter on the board's agenda as an emergency ordinance to do an immediate extension of the lease. I should note that by doing so, we will afford the ability to these two individuals or these folks to be able to sell and consequently to be able to buy the unit. It doesn't necessarily foreclose the future discussion or limit the scope of it concerning the potential transfer of the property and fee, but merely to step in and allow this conveyance, this transaction to take place and not impede the ability of this sale and purchase. The only other interesting aspect of the lease is that the Common Ground voluntarily participated in a capital asset inventory that was sponsored by APCHA, and was discovered that there are a number of capital improvements that are in their future, and there's really no way to describe it other than that. The most noteworthy improvement that is expected in the near term is repair and replacing of certain aspects of the roofing of the entire project, which, as you can see in the agenda item summary, has a substantial cost associated with that. The board has the ability to incorporate within the lease terms a requirement to maintain some degree of capital reserve in recognition of what was at least identified in this study as a expected cost for roof repair, or to simply include something as a general requirement based upon a percentage of, say, an annual budget, or to not deal with the matter whatsoever. The space has been reserved within the body of the lease, which appears on page 9 of the lease, and which is Article 15, section, which is the only section within that article of the lease to allow the county to insert something. The opinion that we have is that it would be appropriately addressed. However, realistically, I don't think it would be appropriate to try to cover such a large sum in any kind of a near term. I think the burden would be too great on the owners and occupants and the residents over there. But if the county were to do something, then the more appropriate approach would be to have a staggered requirement that the capital reserve be built up over some period of time, such that they would be in a position to meet the needs that are certainly going to come up in the next few years. Oh, and I would note, Marcia Goshorn is here, and Marcia was one of the initial movers and shakers that got the project off the ground, and has been part of the dialogue for quite some time now concerning Common Ground. And I haven't talked to her, but I'm assuming that you'd like to address the board.
Thank you, John. Any questions for staff at this time?
John, the lease is for the ground underneath the project.
That's correct.
Right? So why are we concerned about the maintenance and ownership of the property above that lease?
Well, we don't have to be, but certainly it's part of the program that the county has invested into. It is participated in directly by APCHA, which is the multi-jurisdictional housing authority created by the county along with the city of Aspen. And from a programmatic approach, if not from a property owner position, the county has always expressed an interest to make sure that affordable housing stock, existing units, continue to be viable and not degrade to a point where they might actually no longer be used, or be in a situation where it would require some additional subsidy from either the county or the city or APCHA to put the project into a good physical condition.
I can understand that. I mean, I can understand that point of view. But these people are owners of that property. They're not renters of that.
They are owners of the units constructed on the property pursuant to a lease extended by the county to use the underlying real estate.
Right. So it's in their interest to maintain their units, isn't it?
Absolutely.
George?
Yeah, I mean, just following that line of thought, it seems like if we were to impose that on Common Ground, why wouldn't we impose that on all of our APSHA units? And that's just, it's a rhetorical question, but for me, it's just...
And to give a rhetorical answer, I suppose, every affordable housing complex is in somewhat of a unique posture, simply because of the time in which it was created. And as the housing program has matured, just like any other program that the county's been involved with, it gets better over time. So we're simply not in a position to go back and redo every condominium association or every complex that has been established in the past, but some we can affect, and certainly one in which we own the underlying real estate, we do have the ability to affect more actively than others. Whether or not we do it is up to the board.
Do we still own the land up at Stillwater, or was that all transferred?
That was transferred.
That was all transferred to the owners. So this is really the only, it's not the only housing that we...
This and Hunter Longhouse, the project right next door, essentially. The county maintains ownership of the land underneath.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that it belongs in this lease, but I do believe it belongs in the APSHA deed restrictions. And to kind of respond to Michael's comments a little bit, we do own an asset in the property, not just the land, and that asset is the deed restriction. That's actually something we are a party to, and there's been long discussions with APSHA that maintenance of protecting that asset is also the responsibility of the homeowners, not just a responsibility of the homeowners and deed restrictions to protect their own assets, but protect an asset which is partially owned by the city and the county. But I do believe, in my opinion, is that kind of belongs a little bit more with APSHA than it does with our lease agreement, although I do understand John's argument that it puts us in a unique situation to encourage that to happen with APSHA, and I'm not sure if there's a way along those lines to make that happen, and in a long term for the deed restrictions to be updated with properties that we own the underlying land to.
And certainly APSHA is looking at, I think, all of the assets within the housing program. It's just that the ability to change deed restrictions, which is essentially a covenant on either price control or occupancy or rental rates or something, that can be done without the cooperation of whoever is the actual owner of the property. There's no requirement for somebody to burden their property with another
Correct.
layered restriction without something more. So there are limitations, but every project presents some avenue, some ability. Certainly with this one, probably the most readily available method for addressing capital reserves is within the body of the lease, and it is simply probably the easiest if the board wants to deal with that topic.
Other questions to staff at this time, Steve?
John, just if we extend the lease to start a new 50-year lease at this time, that doesn't preclude us from revisiting the whole issue and having discussions with the homeowners there and maybe doing some different system or different conditions or anything like that?
It certainly doesn't preclude, as I mentioned, continuing the dialogue on whether it's appropriate for the county to maintain ownership of the property or to convey it out, because we can always dispose of the property to an entity such as a homeowners association that already exists and occupies the property, or to APCHA or to some other entity. The ability, once the lease has been extended and accepted, the only ability to modify the lease then is with the willingness of both parties to the lease. And so if we are going to enter into the lease, and if the board wants to consider addressing capital reserves, this is the time to do that. We could always do it later, but only with the agreement of the homeowners association, the lessee.
Yeah, I would like to have continuing discussions with the homeowners. I've talked on several occasions with Marcia about, some of the different issues. A lot of the issues have to do with the fact they haven't been able to get loans on their properties just to do remodels or upgrades or anything, and they've been very frustrated by the situation there. So if we could plan on having further discussions about it, and I realize that the reason for the emergency ordinance is so one of the properties can be conveyed on Monday, and if we don't do that today, then that halts that proceeding from happening.
So one of the things that was raised by John for the board's discussion is, this idea of a requirement that could happen in several different ways. And one way is, that I think John mentioned, is that it could be at a date down the road that requirement kicks in, and that could be 10, 15, 20 years from now, to give them time to build that capital reserve to that amount. And again, as I said, it's really an APCHA thing to protect our deed restriction. Our deed restriction is an asset on that property. Just as the buy down of buying a new employee housing unit, it costs money to get that deed restriction in that property. And we want to make sure that the tenants of that deed restriction are protecting that deed restriction. So unless there are more questions to staff, I guess Marcia's kind of the applicant here, so I'll afford her the ability to kind of address. And did you get a copy of that record to Jeanette too? So it goes in the record. There was a letter that was emailed out to us yesterday. Make sure that gets in the record, since you sent that out to all of us.
Yeah. A few things that John didn't mention when he was talking about it. This land was actually conveyed to Pitkin County in the 1800s, and the Pitkin County took out a state community block grant to build the Schultz Health and Human Services building that required, when you finish the Health and Human Services building, that the site of the old hospital be converted into affordable housing. So it wasn't something that we just came up with out of the blue. It was a group of people that came to the county because we knew you had to put affordable housing on it, and proposed doing a co-housing project where the residents would actually do the work to do it. It was a project that it took us 4 years from the time we got the approval from the county commissioners to come up with a plan. It took 4 years because the land owned by the county, but in the city, we had to go through all of the county processes for P&Z and Financial Advisory Board, plus all of the city planning and zoning and all of the different things. So we had to do it all twice. All of the landscaping on the property was done by us. In fact, I have pictures that show what the site looked like when the contractor turned it over to us. We did, it wasn't money put up by the county at the time it was being built. We got bank loans to do it because the lease was put into effect before the construction started. So we were responsible. I mean, this doesn't weigh, but you can actually pass it around. Out of the original 21 households that started the project, 17 of them still live there. And 2 of the units that turned over was because the owners got units out at the Highlands where they got a freestanding home with a garage, and they couldn't pass that up. So it was one of those things where the common house itself, we did all the work in the common house ourselves. It wasn't part of the construction contract for it. He also mentions the capital reserve study that was put forward by the Housing Frontiers Group, which I'm also a member of. And one of the issue with the capital reserve study, we had talked to the person who did it to try and get some things changed because he made some assumptions on it. We have a commercial kitchen in the common house building. He had said that a commercial kitchen has to be replaced like every 10 years. Well, that's in a restaurant where you're using it 365 days a year for 12 hours a day. He also based the replacement of the boiler system in that building on what was existing. We're still using the boiler that heated a 20,000 square foot hospital. It had 3 boilers, and we've kind of on a spit and a prayer been using parts from one boiler to keep another one going all these years. So the capital reserve study that he did had some major issues in it that didn't really ring true. He went by industry standards that didn't really apply to a lot of things that we have. We do have a capital reserve of over $100,000. And we did have one up until just prior to when he did the study, because we had just finished putting a roof on the common house and we had replaced a third of our roof. So we had been spending down the capital reserve that we had been building up. So we've always had a capital reserve, and everything we've had done up until now has been paid cash. So we've never gone into debt. But one issue when we talked about possibly putting in a new energy efficient heating system in the common house, having a land lease is a detriment to sometimes getting a bank loan for stuff. So right now, even with the land lease, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac doesn't even look at land leases anymore when they do financing. And the bankers had said that they would give me letters, telling why having a land lease is a problem. I mean, it's not a property that you can actually change the use of unless you go back to the state and repay them with 30 years worth of interest on the community block grant that you received for the Health and Human Services building. The other thing that this was a little bit different is the people that were involved to begin with. We met once a week for 4 years to plan this project and get it built. So the sweat equity in it wasn't just, lip service. I mean, it was hard work for 4 years. Even the lilac bushes in the landscaping were around the old hospital. We dug them up and nurseryed them for 1.5 years and saved them and put them back around the site when it was completed. And I would love for you guys to actually, taking a site tour of it is probably the best way to do it, to see what's been done up there. I mean, most of those lilac bushes are now 12 to 15 feet tall, and they're in full bloom right now. And this summer is actually the 20th anniversary of us moving in. We moved in the summer of 1994, so it's been 20 years that we've actually lived there. So we would, going forward with the 50-year lease, I can understand why, APSHA, said, but I had been working with John for almost 3 years, and I kept hearing, we're working on the land transfer, and then we get a notice there's an emergency hearing, we've decided we're not going to transfer the land, we're just going to extend the lease. So it was kind of a little bit blindsided when, we'd been working on this for 3 years.
John, can I ask a question there?
Sure.
We actually had a meeting sometime within my term, the last 3 years, where the board actually made a decision not to transfer the property.
Right.
So there was a decision made to continue with a lease agreement. So at what point were you working on a land transfer?
Before that.
Before that?
I can't remember.
Okay, well, and that was over 1 year or 2 ago.
Yeah, I can't remember when that was.
I don't remember where it was, but there was actually a decision made at the board level that we didn't feel that it was in the best interest of the county to transfer that asset to the Common Ground Homeowners Association.
Well, I do know you also had, I guess, a work session where you brought in the people from Hunter Longhouse and discussed the whole issue. We were never told or asked, to be there, so I'm not sure, there were discussions held that we knew nothing about.
The only Hunter Longhouse issue that I think we met on was the trail thing that had to do with an easement on the trail, and we needed their approval and our approval, and it did the same thing in my recollection.
Although-
It reaffirmed the fact that we were the property owners, and
Hunter Longhouse is actually up for renewal on their lease as well. The discussion, Rob, was, as you recall, having to do with the improvements that would be put on the property associated with the extension of the Hunter Creek Trail over to Hunter Creek Road or Mill Street, right near the Hunter Creek Bridge itself. The request from the Hunter Creek Longhouse individuals, which are represented through AppHigh, which is Aspen Pitkin Employee Housing, Inc., was for an extension of a lease, so there wasn't any discussion there about convey or extend or anything like that.
Now, one difference between us and Hunter Longhouse, they are a rental project run by a management, Ape Housing, which was started by Harry Truscott, and they were actually built prior to us, and they're not under the same restriction that the property we sit on has with the community block grant, because that was separate from this. That community block grant was after Ape Housing was already built, Hunter Longhouse was built. The other issue in the document talked about we have an agreement on the common house, the public usage, which we've always had. I mean, we had the lacrosse girls' end of the year party, we've had graduation parties, the neighborhood associations do their annual meetings. But they talked about, well, we think that you should keep the lower level as the public open space. We don't use the lower level, and we use the upper level for the public usage that people use, because during our construction, the county project manager made the decision that he would allow them to take out the three-phase wiring to the building, and we didn't find out about it till later. So we have an elevator that's now storage because it doesn't go up and down without three-phase wiring. So the lower level is technically not handicapped accessible. The sidewalk down to it has too much of a grade, and it goes down by the river, so doesn't work as a handicapped accessible thing. So we have used the upper level for everything we've done, and it's open to anybody who wants to use it. And we've had actually a lot of uses. Sierra Club, we have guest rooms in there. Sierra Club, when they bring in their interns during the summer, they come and stay a few days and get acclimated to the altitude before they get sent out with their sleeping bags into the wilderness to clean up the trail system. So,
questions for Marcia? Michael?
So, Marcia, so what we have in front of us is an extension of this lease.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go ahead with that?
I mean, that's not going to preclude us having a discussion in the future about a land transfer.
And so you do want to go ahead with it?
Well, because the one unit that's being sold, the gentleman who's selling is getting married and moving to Glenwood, and I don't want to hold him up. It was frustrating to be working on something for 3 years and suddenly have an emergency hearing called. But yeah, extending the land lease is not a bad thing, because we had people who were refinancing in the last several years that couldn't, that had problems getting refinancing because the land lease wasn't 30 years. And being on a land lease, we also get a higher mortgage rate than somebody who's on a fee simple.
And then John Healy mentioned the conditions for capital reserve fund. How do you feel about that?
Well, we actually have a capital reserve policy. We have a capital reserve fund. We always have. We spend it, we bring it back up. And I do kind of have an issue basing what number you want to put in it on that capital reserve study that we've been revising because it wasn't accurate when it was done.
Okay, so you can accept this lease, and then, but as an organization, you'd like to continue discussion both on the transfer of the land, possibly, and also some conditions of improving or maintaining your capital reserve fund. Is that what you're saying? You'd like to have further discussion?
Well, I mean, I think that you had said before, the homeowners having control over the capital reserves makes sense. I mean, I think what we can do is give you a presentation of what our capital reserve policy is, but having in the land lease, to lock us into one particular way of doing it, because even with free market capital reserves, people very rarely have 100% in it, because the banks here have a very wide range of loans that they will do for capital reserve issues. So usually the banks have a percentage that they want in capital reserves, and we've always kept more than the percentage that the banks would require for us to get a loan. But the land lease has been the one impediment that we've had to many things that we've tried to do.
Thank you, Marcia.
Other question, George?
Well, just a comment. What I would like to do is, I'm supportive of moving this emergency ordinance forward. Rather than impose a capital reserve into the lease at this point, what I'd like to consider, the board to consider, is have some wording that releases the county of any liability or commitment for any capital improvement. So it's very clear that we're not going to be responsible if something fails and they haven't got the reserve to handle it, that they're not going to come to the county looking for dollars.
That's fine with me.
John, what are your thoughts on that?
That's fine. I can add that in as an additional clause to the lease. And that way the parties to the lease understand it, and it's there. There is no obligation or liability or requirement on the county now, but that would be an explicit expression of that idea, and nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, we've been there 20 years and we haven't asked for money yet, so.
But there have been other home HOAs that have, so I just want to make sure the county everyone is clear.
Steve?
Rob, just for the board's knowledge, if you weren't already aware, there is the possibility of doing 2 or 3 more units on top of the common house, that like employee units that was part of the hospital, and it's very well strongly built and structurally. I think that would work.
It's concrete block and steel.
That's a possibility for something for us to consider in future discussions about this.
And just out of curiosity, is that for additional units to be able to be used by the public as the units that are in there now, or is that for units for the HOA to sell and raise money? Is that, what's the basis behind the additional density on that property?
Well, I mean, it was just one of those things where when the county and everyone's talking about, places to put affordable housing, I mean, that's a building that I found out this year is actually rated as a bomb shelter because of the construction of that one section of the building that we kept. And Mick Ireland was the one that actually suggested that, yeah, we could tell the county if they want to put if they need someplace to build more affordable housing, and there would be sale units that would be done through APSHA. You could put 3 units on top of that building.
And Rob, we've been approached by Common Ground to look at that. Brian Pettit's going to be taking a look at that, but we don't have any analysis of it at this point. So.
I have another question, just because I never fully understood it. The Common Grounds has got a very specific deed restriction for the lottery. They have a waiting list or something like that. How does that work?
What it is we have an associate membership, people that have been involved through the years, and it's like a $50 one-time fee, and they come to, meetings, they come to, they participate, so they know what they're getting into, that it's not just, they don't just buy a unit. We still do all of our maintenance, like painting our units ourselves. We still do all of our yard work ourselves. It's not the typical one where they hire a project manager and someone else does all the work. And what happens is when a unit comes up for sale, the housing office is given the list of qualified associate members, and it's open to anybody in the community that wants to join. And in fact, Mick Ireland got in because he was an associate member. He wasn't part of the original group that moved in, and then one girl married the man who lived next door to him, so her unit came open. and Mick was one of the associate members, and his name came up in the lottery. So the first round of lottery goes to associate members, and then if there isn't an associate member that qualifies under minimum occupancy or isn't interested in that size unit, then it goes to a full lottery. And we have had the last 2 3-bedrooms we had come open went to full lottery with the housing office.
Okay. Just wanted to understand that.
Are you ready to accept the motion?
Sure.
I would make a motion authorizing an emergency ordinance, authorizing a 50-year ground lease of lands underlying the common ground housing subdivision.
And are we setting this for a public hearing on a date certain?
Yes, I believe it's, the date will be June 25. And George, just to be clear, I assume your motion would include the addition of the clause that
Yes,
you already
thank you.
referred to.
And not include the section.
Delete any capital reserve requirement.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll just say that this will have a public hearing on June 25th. It's an emergency ordinance, so we don't have a public hearing today on it, but we will have public hearing if people of the public want to make comment on this on June 25th for its confirmatory reading. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and find Rachel? And
Yeah, actually, Rachel was an associate member for years.
for public hearing on June 25th. We're going to handle item number 2 and 3, which are first readings. They will have a second reading and public hearing on June 25th. Item 4 is going to be handled separately as a consent action approval resolution by the board without a second hearing. So first thing is a resolution adopting the 2014 Pitkin County Wildfire Protection Plan.
Well, I'm Valerie McDonald. I'm the Pitkin County Emergency Manager. And yes, we're here to talk about our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. But I would like to take a minute to introduce our new employee. And just for the viewing audience, in 2014, the BOCC supported and approved a 30-hour-a-week year-round position of a wildfire mitigation specialist. We have hired Daryl Grove, and he comes to us with over 30 years of fire service experience in the valley, 15 of which he served as the Aspen Fire Chief. So while Daryl has about a 3-page job description, I was hoping we could take a minute and let him talk about a couple of things he's working on right now for the viewing audience's information.
I'm Daryl Grove, the recently hired Pitkin County Wildfire Mitigation Specialist. My job, thanks to Valerie, my task right now is to identify, foster, and implement planning to better mitigate the threat of a catastrophic wildfire to our communities and natural resources. So a lot of my effort has been directed to reaching out and reestablishing contact and a working relationship with county agencies such as ComDev and their land use wildfire component, all of the fire protection districts in Pitkin County, working with them, made an outreach to assist them to coordinate and generate mitigation projects, as well as the Colorado State Forest Service, reached out to the new Department of Fire Prevention and Control, a state organization out of Fort Collins, and have been working to put together an update to our wildfire protection plan in order to provide the foundation for the work that will proceed from here.
Well, and amongst other things, Daryl's reaching out to all the HOAs and caucuses and education, outreach that hopefully leads to mitigation projects in the valley.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you so much and congratulations and welcome aboard. I know you may not have had a chance to look at this yet, but coming back from the Colorado Counties Inc. conference in Keystone, I brought forward the fires mitigation grant program that the state has. I left a copy for John and asked that one be forwarded to you and to Steve Barwick in the city for a couple of reasons. This is the last year the grants will be funded. And they specifically handed out a chart of all the counties who had not yet taken advantage of it in any way, shape, or form. And the grants can go as high as $1 million, although, you know, 100,000, 200,000 is much more normal. And from my reading of the newspaper, with the city's plan, which extended beyond city limits into county areas because they use their water service delivery area, they're thinking of bonding for millions of dollars of fire mitigation work. And of course, city residents are county residents as well. But it just seemed that with the deadline coming up for applications, I'm not sure if it's July 7th, July 1st, something very soon, perhaps working together, we would have enough material to have a winning grant. I'm not sure if we're far enough along or if the city's further along or whatever, but it just seems that it would be of value to kick off some of the mitigation efforts.
I'll take that one just because I've got more history with it. And as the emergency manager, a lot of information like that comes to me, and I consider it part of my job to push that information out to all interested or impacted parties. And I have done that the first round of that grant, I believe was last January. And it's usually done through the Public Safety Council. And we had the information that you pushed out as well. So it was sent out again for the second round, which I believe is due in August. As far as I know, there haven't been any takers for that grants. I mean, some counties have gotten really, really good at applying for and getting grants. I think Pitkin County lags behind in that. We need involved fire districts, and now that we've got our wildfire mitigation specialist, I would hope that situation would improve. But that particular grant, you need a project, and you need a 50% match. So
I realize that. That's why I was thinking perhaps it could be a partnership with the city, who is preparing to bond for a program like that. And it may or may not qualify, but it seemed that they might be further along in being able to successfully apply, and maybe we could make it a joint application in such a way that we pull the money down for our greater community.
we actually put together a team with the city, and I worked with them very, very closely. They were turned down, and the last I heard, they chose not to go forward with that DNR grant, which is what you had. But there was another grant through the pre-disaster mitigation planning that we did. We felt they had we all know their project, the $4.5 million, and they put a lot of effort into that. They had a planning team. They went to Denver to work on their cost-benefit analysis. A lot of man-hours went into that, and they ultimately got turned down. So,
okay.
yeah,
well, we were just hearing from that director of that department to say, please reapply, please come back in. So
definitely.
And part of the program that I'm assembling to put forward to homeowners associations in high-risk areas includes information about matching grant applications. There are a number of those kinds of programs out there. We have our first effort going forward on Sopris Mountain Ranch down outside of Emma, and that'll be part of the program that we'll take to them to ensure that they're aware of that kind of availability.
Thank you.
George?
Yeah, along that lines, Darrell, I was just curious. Last year when we granted some dollars to do, I guess it was like a part-time person to look at fire mitigation, we had identified several different neighborhoods specifically to work with those HOAs. Red Mountain, I think it was east of Aspen, and maybe Shield O, if I recall. Besides Sopris Mountain Ranch, are there any other specific areas or HOAs that are neighborhoods that you're looking at targeting this summer specifically?
I'm working on trying to establish a priority list. I have not been able to put that together as of yet.
I think you might want to talk, you're more well-versed in it than I am, and Cindy is here with the ComDev redoing their master planning, they're involving Daryl in that process as well. So fire mitigation can be addressed in all of those plans as they're being updated.
They're working actually to update the caucus master plans, and we've held a meeting to discuss the possibility of including a wildfire component a little more positively, proactively in those master plan updates, and we intend to pursue that.
That sounds like a great idea. Steve?
Daryl and Valerie, looking through the plan, I was comparing the different subdivisions in Capitol Creek, because that's where I live, and I noticed that the Little Elk Creek Village is listed basically at the same level of risk as the Gateway Mesa. And there are two totally, one's in a wetland and the other's on a brushy hillside. They're really two totally different wildfire hazards, and yet on the maps, the way I'm reading the maps, they look like they're the same wildfire hazard. And I realize the plan's been signed off by virtually everybody but us at this point, and we don't want to go into revising the plan necessarily right now, but it would be something to keep in mind to try to, as time goes on, to update the different maps and the different recommendations.
The scale of the county map needs to be refined when you begin to focus in on subdivisions, HOAs, that kind of thing. So the scale that you're seeing there and the data that you're seeing there is sort of objectively arrived at, and it really requires site-specific analysis in order to establish the final risk and the final priority. ComDev is very aware of that. They've done a remarkable job of proceeding from this baseline objective data into site-specific assessments.
Sorry, I would just like to add that we consider this a living document. We're required to update it every 2 years, but as part of Daryl's extensive job description, he's going to be looking at it every year and reviewing it with all the impacted agencies.
And I think you'll find, Daryl, that the different subdivisions in the Snowmass Capitol Creek caucus area are really tuned into wildfire mitigation and finding escape routes for them to get out of dead-end subdivisions and that sort of thing. So I think you'll enjoy working with the different neighborhood groups there.
Thank you.
Other questions? I accept a motion to authorize the Pickens County Wildfire Protection Plan.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? This is set for public hearing on June 25th. This is the first reading, so people can make public comment on June 25th. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is authorizing the Consumer Protection Program state contract. Kurt, if you just state your name for the record and move on with the presentation.
Ready. Kurt Dahl, Pickens County Environmental Health Manager. I have the annual contract renewal with the State Health Department, Division of Environmental Health and Sustainability, authorizing my department to do consumer protection services in Pickens County. We do inspections of restaurants, child cares, and schools on a regular basis. And then on a complaint basis, we investigate public pool complaints or hotel complaints, things like that. Those two last pieces are rare, but they are part of the contract. We do these in Pickens County outside the city limits. The city has their own environmental health department and has a contract with the State Health Department to do consumer protection services there. We've been contracting with State Health since the late 1960s, which is probably one of the longest contracts that I am aware of for consumer protection services. And this year, there are minimal changes. The one change that I wanted to bring forward was there's a discussion about striving to complete 100% of the inspections required in the contract. Last year, the state had changed it to an 80% completion rate, looking more for qualitative inspections instead of worrying about your numbers and actually spending time on high-risk facilities. So the change this year, initially there was some reaction about, why are we doing this? It seems to be different than the intent from last year's change. And the state, again, they use the word strive, and then they do make a comment about trying to attain 25% completion per quarter, really to do the better job of protecting public health versus, getting all the inspections done at one period in time. So, and I agree with both of those concepts. And initially had some concern because 100% is probably not attainable, simply because like the database is not accurate. I mean, there are a number of reasons. The way we count inspections is not accurate, especially here where we have a lot of seasonal facilities, and we're required to do 2 inspections of those when it's only realistic to do 1. So we had some discussion with the state, and when I say we, several of the other environmental health directors that have contracts with the state health department have had various discussions, and we've talked about it. And the intent really from the state is to start accumulating some data showing why people are either making all of their numbers of inspections or not. It's simply a way to try to get some data together to assist in arguments for additional funding for those places where staffing is an issue in terms of being able to, actually complete their inspections. And the other piece that I didn't put in here that might be of interest to you guys, for those counties or jurisdictions that don't have a contract with the state, so really the state health department has MOUs with county health departments that don't have a contract. They have something similar in that MOU. And again, it's this intent of looking across the entire state at trying to accumulate some data for why it is that we don't meet 100% of the inspections. So I don't believe that we're going to have an issue with the attain 100%. I mean, we strive for that anyway, and we usually get pretty close. And in talking with colleagues in the state health department, this isn't something where you got 92%, we're going to withhold it. This is more let's document why it wasn't, so we can go back in and look at these reasons and maybe find some additional funding to help those places that need staff. So, Rachel?
Yeah, Kurt, thanks for being here today. Can you tell us approximately how many inspections you perform in a year?
Sure.
Or your department does?
Last year we did 140 inspections of restaurants, daycares, and schools. And those were regular inspections. In addition, last summer and then in January at the X Games, we did another 30 inspections of temporary facilities. The vendors that come to our events like Mammoth Fest and X Games, we inspect those as well. It's not a requirement from the state health department. They don't do that in the counties where they have direct services because they don't have staff there. They don't have staff available to be at these events on the weekends, but we do those. So it's 170 total last year.
Okay. It's no secret that we are performing these inspections because if you leave it to the state health department to do it, their record is getting around to places maybe once every 2 or 3 years. And approximately how much does it actually cost us to perform the inspections? I know we get the $10,000, but what do you believe the true cost of those services are?
I don't have a number for the cost. What I've done in the past is looked at this. The contract amount is $10,000, and at least looking at the direct costs and trying to account for some of the indirect costs, that's probably paying for about 10 to 15% of the cost to run that program.
That's what I was looking at. It's roughly $75 per visit or less if you do these temporary visits, and it just is something we've brought forward to Colorado Counties Inc. before. But there needs to be better cost recovery or better grant from the state. When they want these services performed for public health and safety.
Right. Steve.
Kurt, the total contract, including the $10,000, is actually for 32,000 something total, the way I'm reading it. And the $10,000 was in addition to the original amount in the first part of the contract.
Right.
Now, is the additional $10,000 meant to reimburse us for trying to do 100% of, rather than 80% of the inspections?
No, so the original contract was signed 2 years ago for 12,000. I don't remember the exact 12,295. And then all they've done is made amendments for each additional year past that. So last year it was a $10,000 amendment to do inspections for that year. This year's another amendment to that contract just to do another $10,000. So the entire contract just continues to be amended so that we're not rewriting one every year. So it's only $10,000 for this year, but the overall one, because the contract continues to get extended, it is showing up as a $32,000 contract.
Okay, so we're not actually receiving $32,000 this year.
No,
We're receiving $10,000
Exactly.
this year.
Right, and
It'd be better if we were receiving $32,000.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
Would you accept the motion?
I will.
I would move to approve the resolution authorizing the Consumer Protection Program state contract.
Second.
A first and a second. Again, this is a first reading. There's a public hearing set for June 25th on this item. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, Kurt. Next, we have a consent action, one reading item. It's a resolution approving the Emma Farms Parker Settlement Agreement, and Dale Will is here to give us the latest on the settlement.
Thanks, Rob. Well, I'm happy that this day has arrived when I believe all the parties, all four of them that have been involved in this rather sad situation have reached agreement. To date, the Parker family, otherwise represented under the name of Happy Day Ranch, the Emma Farms, and the Aston Valley Land Trust have all reached an agreement and have signed the documents that are in the packet. The gist of this situation is that accessing the Crown from the Roaring Fork River Valley has historically been fairly difficult to do, and there's only a few points that you can achieve that on. I've got a map in the packet that shows those. There had been some sort of relationship between these two neighbors for decades that involved the Emma Farms property using a gully that comes down over there to access the Crown. And then in 2005, Pitkin County was the recipient of a grant of a trail easement for a public trail up this same route. The dispute arose over what was really the nature of the relationship between these two ranches side by side, and whether this ability to drive cattle up and down that path was something that was permissive or whether it was a matter of right. These kinds of questions are often difficult to determine, and a lawsuit was filed. We were involved originally because we were the owners of the trail easement and co-owners of a conservation easement on the same side of Happy Day Ranch. Since the lawsuit was filed, we've also become the owners of what we had called the Salt and Stall property, and has now become part of our glacier open space, where there is another access point up onto the Crown, frankly one that's a little easier to deal with. There's a ranch road that goes through there. So as the settlement discussion evolved, the county's role in it was really twofold, our potential role. In the first instance, on the Nancy's Path access route, the settlement would provide that we would administer the agricultural access side by side with our current administration of the trail itself, And the added chores that would involve, I think, are acceptable to the Open Space Department, but they include being the keeper of the lock on a gate between Emma Farms and Happy Day Ranch. And the idea is that under the settlement, for 10 days out of every grazing season, Emma Farms or its agent may use the Nancy's Path route to drive their cattle onto the Crown. However, when they want to do that, they need to give notice to Open Space and Trails, and we'll go open the gate, and we probably will post some sort of notice for the general public that if that there's going to be cows on the trail. Historically, we've been suggesting people avoid the area during these cattle drives, but they're a pretty short window, as stated. We'll be required to maintain the route under the same terms as we're currently maintaining the route of Nancy's Path, and frankly, it's a primitive access, and it's at the bottom of a steep gully, and we've seen weather events bring a fair amount of debris through there, and the settlement agreement acknowledges that acts of God may render that thing pretty hard to get through, and we'll repair it as best we can. In addition, as I mentioned, we've also got the adjacent open space with a better access point, and whereas the access on Nancy's Path will be for moving cattle with no motor vehicles, we have agreed at the staff level that the Emma Farms, or its agent, Rory Cerise, is currently out there running cattle, can come through our property on an ATV on the daily kinds of maintenance activities that you have to do when you've got cows up on federal lands. There's stock ponds on the Crown, and there's fencing and gates and other things that need to be managed, and the holder of the grazing permit up there has obligations to the BLM to take care of business. And so we've agreed that kind of daily access on an ATV can go on through our open space property. I don't see it as a significant change from the way we would manage our open spaces generally. We've got several handshake agreements with other ranchers for using our trails with their ATVs to take care of ditches and so on. There is a final clause there that if for some reason Nancy's Path becomes impassable for these cattle drives, they can also ask our permission to bring them through the glacier open space, and we are authorized under the terms of this agreement to require mitigation that would be determined at the time those requests would come in. We've currently got a management planning process underway for the glacier open space. There was a meeting of the Specialty Crops Subcommittee this week. For those of you driving up and down the valley, you may have noticed behind the Emma Schoolhouse we now have the first row crops in the Mid-Valley that have been planted, to my knowledge, in quite some time, and there's a side roller, and so that's a different piece of county open space, but may be indicative of some of the future uses we might have on the glacier open space, and therefore we want to be able to make sure that any cattle drives through there would be done in a way that wouldn't damage any kind of cropping that might evolve in the days to come. So all of those things have been addressed. I note Dave Myler is here representing Emma Farms, and I recommend that you approve this whole agreement. I'm quite happy to see that it's reached this point. Both the parties in this litigation have been friendly to the causes of open space with both agricultural preservation and public recreation. So,
thank you. Questions, Steve, and then Michael?
Dale, I'm really glad that the Parkers and Mr. Waldeck have finally come to terms on this, and I think probably one big reason why they were able to come to terms was because of the access through the salt and stall piece being available. And I'm just curious, when Rory goes on his four-wheeler to go to the salt and stall, does he cut across the property, or does he go down the county roads and come in that way? Do you know?
Well, it's a great question. Rory has had a lease agreement with the Glacier family for a long time. As some of you may know, they're they're related bloodlines. And he has that lease with us this year. At the conclusion of our management planning process, we're going to be looking at putting our agricultural land out for more of a kind of procurement style leasing decision. And all of this may affect the answer to the question. Currently, Rory does come through the gate, cross the glacier pasture, and find his way up back onto the regular route from Hooksborough Road up through the salt stall property and up onto the ground. If in the future he does not have access, he doesn't have the lease on that glacier piece, and if that access through there is not appropriate for some other reason having to do with the way that property is being leased or managed, then what the license agreement we've come up with says is that he will come around the other way and come down Hooksborough and go up through our ranch road there.
Okay. In the event that, I know that originally Tom Waldeck was wanting to be able to take heavy equipment in to maintain Nancy's path, because it is prone to flash flooding and debris flow and stuff. If the county has to go in there to maintain that, would you be allowed to take in equipment, or would you be doing everything by handwork?
We don't have any right of access through Emma Farms, and frankly,
No, I mean through Nancy's path.
taking heavy equipment around through Nancy's path may be challenging. My interpretation of this is we've got some flexibility that if we were to authorize someone else, potentially Emma Farms, to work on that trail, then that could be done. But as a legal matter, the right to maintain the trail is held by Pitkin County under these agreements. So there would be no right of Emma Farms to take backhoes and things in there unless it was part of a larger understanding that we've.
That was a huge point of contention in their disagreement, of course. So that's why I was asking if Pitkin County then could go in with equipment instead of Mr. Waldeck.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I've been mightily impressed by some of the debris flows that have come down on the Catherine Store side of the Crown in recent years. So those gullies didn't happen gradually. I think John Wesley Powell said the West was formed in a series of catastrophic events, and they'll happen from time to time. So,
Michael?
Dale, the 10 days that you talked about, are they consecutive days or random days?
I believe we're talking about 10 days total. Am I correct in that date? So
what are the dates then of the grazing season? Do you have specific dates for that?
we have that in here, and I'm not sure I can recite them from memory, but it's approximately from March through December when those permits are open.
Thanks.
The concept is you've got a cattle drive in at the beginning of the season and a cattle drive out at the end of the season. So similar to what just happened through the downtown Carbondale over the weekend.
Additional questions? Steve?
I move to approve the resolution authorizing settlement agreement in the Emma Farms versus Parker case, including a revocable license agreement.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? I'd like to just say one thing in an effort to kind of boost open space and trails. We're very grateful for the Parkers and all of our conservation easements. Sometimes the conservation easements have little twerks like this that need to be worked out. I'm glad that we could come to a settlement. But we've added tremendous value to our community, our county, our valley by being able to get these conservation easements that are sometimes gifted to us, sometimes in exchange for cash. But it's a program that's so wonderful value to our community, and this was a tough dispute over a conservation easement that happened, and I'm glad that it's come to a good resolution in the end, and hopefully our program will continue to grow and in ways like this. So. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dave, if you want to give a quick.
Just wanted to say thank you all for your patience and your cooperation and your understanding. It was important that you guys played the role that you did in order for us to bring this to a conclusion. And thanks to Dale for all of his hard work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's handle one more item before we take a break. We're moving now into our consent public hearings, second readings, and we have an ordinance authorizing the sale of the Stapleton Brothers Dish Historic Consumption Use Credit to the Maroon Creek LLC. And John Ely presented this 2 weeks ago, or a week ago?
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago, and if you'd like to give us a little briefing on it, we can.
Sure. Nothing has changed with the proposed ordinance that the board considered 2 weeks ago on first reading. This is the second reading and public hearing. To execute an ordinance to authorize the transaction of sale of some of the historic consumptive use credits associated with the county's interest in the Stapleton Brothers Ditch. The Stapleton Brothers Ditch diverts water out of Maroon Creek in a location approximately even with the Island Fields, and then delivers that water in a ditch all the way down to the county's interests at the airport property, which used to be known as the Airport Ranch. The water associated with this transaction was actually used to irrigate land that has now been dried up with the construction of the northern end of the runway and associated taxiway. The price or the value that the county will receive in the sale of these historic consumptive use credits is $120,000. It represents a $10,000 per acre foot, so 12 acre feet will be transacted. The price was a value that was established by the county and was simply agreed to by the prospective buyer. The contract contemplates a closing within 90 days of today's date when the ordinance takes effect, if the board approves it. The change that will be applied for in Water Corp will be the responsibility of the buyer. To the extent that the county can assist, we will. The use of the historic consumptive use credit will be for augmentation associated with evaporative loss of water stored in various ponds at the Maroon Creek Club golf course. As a consequence, this augmentation use will see that amount of water, that 12 acre feet, bypassed at the Stapleton Brothers ditch headgate and then flow downstream to a point where there would no longer be a call that would affect the ability of the Maroon Creek Club to maintain those ponds on their property. Should that use change and the use of the water be for some other consumptive use, and the county would have the ability to reacquire those water rights for 1/2 of the original sales price, regardless of when that might happen in the future or what the value of the water might be at that time. I'm recommending that the board go ahead and approve this transaction. It will accomplish the goal of infusing the Airport Enterprise Fund with some needed cash in the tune of $120,000. It will also accomplish the county's goals of preserving and enhancing in-stream flows by seeing this amount of water bypassed at the historic diversion point, the Stapleton Brothers headgate, and remain committed to in-stream flow benefit to provide for the augmentation of evaporative loss for ponds at the Maroon Creek Club.
Questions for staff? Steve?
John, could this same kind of process be done with other parties besides the Maroon Creek Club? Somebody along the Roaring Fork who would need augmentation water could come to Picken County and get some more water from Stapleton Brothers did?
Absolutely.
And then we would do the same thing, that water would be, that amount of water would be left in the creek instead of being diverted?
We can transact the water any way the board sees fit, or the historic use credits, I should say. But what we were looking for in this instance was a transaction that would necessarily leave water committed to stream flow, even though that's not the specific stated purpose of the water right, but the practical reality of it being that the amount of physical water would be left in the stream, and as a consequence benefit and enhance stream flow from that point of diversion on Maroon Creek all the way down through the Roaring Fork. So yes, to your question, we can do that many
just
times.
like the saltwater conservation district does with the water they have available from Root Eye. We basically have a little tiny pool of water. We can do the same type of transaction.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see.
Additional questions? Take a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the ordinance authorizing the sale of Stapleton Brothers Ditch Historic Consumptive Use Credits to Maroon Creek Club.
Second.
We have a first and a second. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at this time. Bring it back. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Why don't we take a 17-minute break till 2 o'clock, and Glenn, you can set up for Chamonix, I guess, and we have one item before that, but it's continuance, which is also somewhat you. Welcome back. Again, today is Wednesday, June 11, 2014. This is the Board of County Commissioners' regular meeting in Pickens County, Colorado. And we are now moving into our land use public hearings. The first item, which will be a continuance, although it's a public hearing section, is the Celestial Land Company LTD activity envelope site plan review, special review, and GMQS exemption modifications of a hearing officer's determination. And this is going to be continued to July 21st. Is that correct, John? Let me make sure I got the date right. July 21st at 9 a.m. It's at this point scheduled at 9 a.m. This is, before we get a motion for a continuance, this is a public hearing. We will be taking public hearing at that July 21st meeting. So I would encourage the audience, if they don't have anything pertinent at this point to say, to make their public comment at that time. But they can make public comment now. So I will open the public hearing on this item. Anybody wishing to make public comment on this may so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We will again reopen the public hearing for this item when we re-meet on July 21st. For those people that want to make comment at that time, I will take a motion for a continuance to July 21st at 9 a.m.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Next on our item is La Chamonix Homeowners Association subdivision, detailed submission, final plat, and PUD, second reading. And Mike Kramer is here for the staff to present.
Okay, thank you. Mike Kramer with Pickens County Planning Staff. And the applicant is the La Chamonix Homeowners Association, Inc., represented next to me by Glenn Horn. The location is 1501 Maroon Creek Road, right across from the Highland Ski Area. And the applicant is requesting a detailed final plat and PUD second reading decision from the Board of County Commissioners. This is the second reading public hearing, and this is the final installment for this. And quickly, if you remember, this has been ongoing for at least 2 years and a half now. And we have already done a code amendment to create the RMF, Residential Multifamily Zone District, and then also have an ordinance that the board has adopted already to rezone the property to RMF. And if the board adopts the second reading final plat resolution, those two ordinances will come into effect. And the whole purpose of this application is to allow La Chamonix to eliminate its non-conforming status in our AR10 zone district and then build out basement space. So there were minor changes that we had to the PUD, the Planned Unit Development Guide that's attached to the board. They were so minor, for example, eliminating duplicate words. We revised a spelling error, or unsubstantial. But we have drafted the resolution, and we are recommending approval at second reading, and there is the resolution for your review.
Questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, we will move to the applicant's presentation.
We have nothing to say.
Nothing additional to say. Any questions of the applicant at this time? Michael.
Glenn, where's Mr. Jones?
You know, I don't know where Rick is, but he thought I could handle it on my own.
Well, good.
Back to the board for discussion at this point, or any other questions?
Public hearing?
Yeah. Seeing none, let's open the public hearing on this item. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item. Bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion. Steve.
I move to approve a resolution of Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County granting detailed final plat submission and planned unit development approval for La Chamonix Association Incorporated at the La Chamonix Multi-Family Housing Complex Units 1 through 12.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Next, we have the Aspen Valley Ranch Major Amendments and Development Permit Activity envelope and site plan review, special review, GMQS exemption, and caretaker dwelling unit. This was continued from 4/23/2014, and Suzanne is here to present for the staff, that is.
Okay. Do you have anything, just general plan, the overall shooting match? Okay. Okay.
Suzanne, go ahead.
All right. Well, Glenn and I, between the two of us, just realized that he has some specialized graphics for you, but neither of us brought just sort of the basic, here's the ranch map for you. I'm sure I could find one if you'd like me to pull one up and put it up there, but I don't have it.
Actually, the trail one will have it on.
The trail one will have all the
That one.
the parcels. Okay, that's good enough just to sort of get us in the general location, showing the
Yeah, that'll have.
showing the ranch. So yeah, that's good for now, just to have something to point out. So you considered this application initially on April 23rd, requested a site visit that was conducted on May 27th. In your packet, there was some additional information submitted by the applicant to address certain of the issues that had come up at the last hearing, and issues, from the site visit. So I'll just quickly address the issues as I put them in my memo, and then turn it over to Glenn and the applicants to go into some of the more detailed issues. I think, as I said in the memo, in Glenn's June 2nd update or amendment supplement to the application, he kind of went through for each of these issues what they're entitled to under the existing approvals, what they had initially requested, and then what had changed. I'm just going to talk about kind of our response to what has changed at this point and where we stand on these issues. And again, if you want me to backtrack and give more information on those, I can, or Glenn can do that as part of his presentation as well. So you can kind of let us know how much background information you want. The first issue relates to Homestead 1. So right over here. It's actually right. You can see the envelopes are showing here. Sorry, this thing seems to be dying. Try that one. So Upper River Road here, and where we came into the ranch right here. The envelope here on Homestead 1 for a couple of the agricultural buildings, and the caretaker unit is right here. We walked around in that site. And then the site for the ranch manager house, which is the free market residence on Homestead 1, is located right here. So a couple of the issues that had come up, one that we discussed on the site visit, was that they determined that the equipment barn, which one is that? Is that close to here, this one, or the
one to the right?
Or the one in the middle, the one on the right? Oh, now yours thing went away. Actually broke a ridge line if you looked at it from points along Upper River Road as you looked out this way. So they have committed that they would ensure that they would not break the ridge line, and I think they'll show additional information today that shows that they have adjusted the buildings to accomplish that. They would provide additional landscaping on the south side of the hay and equipment barns for screening from Upper River Road, and they've committed to limit the free market house for the ranch manager to 5,750 square feet of floor area, as long as those agricultural facilities remain on Homestead 1. If those are removed, and essentially at that point the status of the homestead goes back to its prior status of being a residential parcel that would allow up to 13,250 square feet, and that would require TDRs to go beyond 5,750 at that point. So what basically they're saying for now, it would be limited to 5,750 residential square footage plus those agricultural buildings. If and when those go away, then it has the potential to revert back to 13,250 square feet of floor area. Staff doesn't have any issues with that.
Before we move on to the next topic, I wanted to ask, given that since this was originally approved, the larger project, we have instituted I'm not sure I get the title quite right, the Ag Accessory Building Code by right. We loosened up the horse barn and ag gen facilities to give all lots a certain amount by right. If this ag facility is built as proposed by the applicants, and then it's removed so that a new free market home could go there up to the 13,000 square feet, would the other remaining lots be able to put up their own individual ag accessory buildings on their lots and, by right? And I mean, are we kind of setting this up to?
I don't think it changes that. I mean, the idea here originally was that accessory agricultural buildings would only be on the ag facilities parcel.
Right.
And could not be built on the individual parcels.
Correct.
The only change to that they're asking for now is that it's the ag facilities parcel in Homestead 1. I think if those facilities go away on Homestead 1, we would be talking about reverting back to you can only have ag buildings on the ag facilities parcel. I don't think you're opening it up, but we might need to add language to that effect. I think we talked about the reversion for the residential floor area. But we probably would need to capture that. I don't think it changes any. The intent is not to change it that suddenly now you get to have ag buildings on all of the parcels.
Yeah, and I realize the property now is in a single ownership and they are looking to continue a type of master plan. But if the individual lots were sold off and someone had different intentions, even if this remains where it is now as a new ag facility, would the individual lots be able to pursue their own accessory ag square footage by right? Or would the fact that this is a
Right now, it's not technically a PUD because they didn't go through that process under the code because they're 35s. But under this existing approval, it has specific language that does not allow them to have ag buildings on the individual parcels.
Okay, and that would overrule the county's current code that allows such ag accessories.
I think that the condition is applicable. I mean, it's I don't think that would. I mean, maybe John can weigh in, I guess, but I mean, there's nothing that. I mean, the condition would still be in place.
Thank you.
Steve and then Michael.
Yeah, on page 4 of the resolution, number 11, it says agricultural buildings are prohibited on parcels 2 through 9. It says it pretty clearly.
Right, and then I guess, but to Rachel's point, I guess sort of this. Sorry, let me see where the condition is about the. Condition 8 talks about if the ag buildings are removed, then residential floor area of up to 13,250 may be developed. So it may be that we want to add some language there that says if they're removed, then that square footage can only be utilized on the agricultural facilities parcel, something to that effect.
Does that sound okay to the board? So we're moving forward. Michael, you want to weigh in on this?
Well, when you say, does it sound okay, exactly what are you asking?
She is asking to amend the document, the resolution, to add language to the extent of if the agricultural square footage goes away from parcel number 1, that it could only be replaced on parcel number 1. Is that correct?
Yeah.
No, on the traditional ag.
On the ag facilities parcel.
Traditional ag facilities parcel.
Well, I still have more questions.
Okay.
That sounds like we're sort of approving this particular portion. I'm not ready to go there yet. I have more questions. So, Suzanne, what was the original purpose of the original, or at least this previous approval, on concentrating agricultural buildings on one location?
The idea was obviously to cluster the buildings in one central area. I guess traditionally on this property, the ag facilities were located in the area near the historic house, the historic barn. So that was the original idea. One of the issues that's come up in terms of them locating some of these facilities was the debris flow that had been identified and required to be mitigated, but we weren't aware during the prior reviews of the extent of that mitigation. I think on the site visit we saw basically that whole area on the ag facilities parcel where the gully comes in above the historic barn And then the area that would be used for that to be detained and allow it to spread out was the area where they had anticipated putting agricultural buildings. And now that would accommodate the debris flow area. So that was led to part of their consideration of looking to move some of those buildings to another location. I think Glenn could also speak to, he can speak more to the reasons why they see it appropriate to provide this separate cluster towards the entrance to the ranch, I think is another factor for them. But initially we were looking to cluster everything in one area.
And there's an adjacent subdivision, the Chaparral Ranch, that's just adjacent to this property, and their agricultural buildings are all clustered in one area. Is that right?
Correct.
With a prescription against agricultural buildings being on individual lots. So that seems to be a template that the county, and I think probably the caucus, likes, because it concentrates those use buildings in one area rather than spread them throughout the subdivision. Right? I mean, is that your understanding?
Yeah, but it's clearly, and it's a provision we've provided for that in the code under the ag building regulations, where we say if you aggregate, you can aggregate the square. If you agree not to put ag buildings on every single parcel and aggregate it, you can aggregate all that square footage together, adding all your acreage together. So, we've tried to encourage that in the code.
Okay, thank you.
George.
Suzanne, I had a question regarding the ranch manager's house. I know we've done in the past few years several different ag parcels where we've had to deal with ranch manager structures, and we've either limited the size of those structures or made them deed restricted. And I'm just curious, for a ranch manager to have a home 5,750 square feet, doesn't quite equate for me.
Well, in this case, they're basically using the right to develop a free market residence on this lot, and they're using it to house their ranch manager. They're not at this time building a 5750. I think it's 2,500 square feet or 2,600 square feet.
24.
24. But the idea is that it's the free market residence on the lot. It's not. They're not proposing it to be a deed restricted lot in their. For their internal operations, they're dedicating it for use by a ranch manager at this point in time.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be used by a ranch manager. They have the right to build 5750, so they could build 5750 as long as they keep that intact. They could, as long as they don't sell it, they could house whoever they wanted it.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Rachel?
We'll say this now, so perhaps Glenn, you can address it, but it's a little troubling to have well, maybe it'll be this and maybe it'll be that. And, we've gone through that already with the road. This is the best place for the road ever could possibly be during our last hearings. Now, no, that's really not a good place. We'd like to move it over here, and we'd like to move the ag facilities over here, but we'd like to have the potential to put up a larger home later. And it just seems that with that type of large square footage hanging out there at 13,000 some odd, it's almost, too much of an attraction to eventually say, barn's gone, and we'll now refit that somewhere else into the master plan. Even if we put in this document, it's got to go back to the original ag parcel, I wouldn't be surprised to see a new applicant come in and say, oh, no, it should be on the bottom of number 5 because we want to build this free market home up here now on 1. And it just seems that the neighbors and everyone should get some surety as to what this plan really is about and what it's going to be moving forward. And so I'm not very favorable to the request to maintain 13,000 square foot potential single family home on that. I think there's got to be a smaller number that is, a less attractive conversion point. It just seems that that's destined to become conversion to a single family home, and that's why you're reserving those rights.
Suzanne, you want to continue?
Okay, so next issue. So on the agricultural facilities parcel, which is actually this, entire parcel that includes the hillside, the actual area sorry, I'm right in here, where the buildings are located, where the historic barn, the historic house, the area where there is some existing development. At the last meeting, we talked about their request. They had previously gotten designated to the historic register, the barn, the house, and the potato cellar, and they had gotten incentives in exchange for that, which included 2 accessory structures with bathing facilities that they're no longer proposing to build. They want to eliminate those. So they came in to ask for sort of a replacement for that incentive to change that out. And we had raised concerns about them asking for more square footage than was being given up for those accessory structures. So the applicant has come back and they have agreed to surrender 2 TDRs for the additional square footage that they're requesting, which is 4,150 square feet. So what they would get from their original incentive was they have 3,500 square feet to build what they're referring to as the ranch house, which is a common gathering facility for the property owners. That remains from the original incentive. 1,500 square feet that they had for those accessory structures would now be used to finish out the second level of the barn to use as basically what they're calling a locker room. 1,500 square feet doesn't get them enough square footage to finish out the entire second floor. So as out of those 2 TDRs, they would use, I think it's 900 square feet, would finish out the second floor of the barn. So it's basically within the existing structure, the space would be finished as floor area. As we know it. And then the additional 3,250 square feet out of the 2 TDRs would be used to build the pool house that we've discussing. So essentially what they're asking for here is the same things they'd asked for last time, but they're willing to offer 2 TDRs for that additional floor area beyond the 5,000 square feet they had originally gotten as an historic incentive. Is that clear? Gets kind of confusing in the swapping of spaces.
Steve?
Suzanne, do the owners have their own TDRs from the dry Woody Creek parcels? It says they would be surrendering or have those been removed from the property so they'd have to purchase more?
They have TDRs from the dry Woody Creek parcels. That is not enough TDRs to create all of the development rights they need for the residences and this. So they'll be acquiring more TDRs than what they're getting off of.
You're saying they would surrender.
Surrender just means they're handing us 2 TDRs that come from...
Some of them they already have and some they
Right. It could be those TDRs. It could be other TDRs that they've acquired.
So, Suzanne, in the master plan, Woody Creek master plan, it really suggests that TDR is not being quoted from elsewhere into Woody Creek, but they derive from Woody Creek. So hopefully Glenn will have some answers to that.
Suzanne, continue.
So the other piece to that on the agricultural facilities parcel was the request to designate the ranch house as a principal residential use. This gets kind of the technical zoning issues, but it would allow them to build the ranch house to 28 feet rather than a 28 feet rather than 20 feet to the midpoint.
Suzanne, I'm sorry, I'm starting to get confused because we have a ranch house on lot 1 that we've talked about.
Not a ranch manager house. This is what they refer to as the ranch house is this common facility, common gathering facility. Is that a good enough description of it?
Clubhouse?
It was, under the old plan, it was more like the clubhouse for all of the different lot owners, and it was approved with residential floor area to include a bathroom and kitchen facility so that they could have, a gathering place. So the former owners called it the ranch house, in quotations. That was the name of the clubhouse, essentially. And that name is referenced throughout all the approval documents, which is why we continue to use it in the hopes of avoiding confusion.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's
hard to do.
That's the facility we're talking about.
Okay, and where's the location of it?
Do you have anything that brings it in closer or not?
It's on there, actually. You can see where here's the historic homestead and the ranch house will be right there to the right of it. So there's the barn.
Near the potato cellar?
Yeah, but right next to the potato cellar.
So that's out of the debris.
Yeah.
It is out of the debris. It's above where the debris flows out.
And although it has a kitchen and bath, it's not a residential unit?
It's not a residence, correct.
So what's the classification of it?
It's
residential
it's
floor.
It's not a dwelling unit, I guess, is the difference.
It's not a
It does
dwelling
not-
unit, so it's a what?
Does not have bedrooms.
It's a facility that's like a clubhouse, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I understand sort of the intent, but I don't understand what the county calls it.
Well, basically, I mean, we're calling it residential floor area, but it's not a dwelling unit. I mean, it's like an accessory structure, in this case, a fairly large accessory structure.
So it's
It
sort
allows-
of a common use accessory structure.
Correct.
What it is, with no residential potential.
Right.
Okay.
So, and the issue here was this question of height and how tall it could be built. My primary concern was checking in with Susanna Reed and the impact on the adjacent historic structures, and if she felt that the height was appropriate at 28 feet, and she did not have any concerns with how that relates to it's closest to the historic barn, and between the historic barn and the potato cellar, and she did not feel that there was a difference that had any effect between the 20-foot height and the 28-foot height.
What's the height of the barn, Suzanne?
Can you tell me, Glenn?
I don't know the height of. I know that the height of the horse barn there is, which is the new structure, is not at 28 feet. It's as an accessory structure, 20 feet. The height of the historic barn, I'm not sure of, but it's high.
It would exceed that, definitely.
It probably exceeds 28 because you saw the barn. It's been there for years, and it's big, tall.
Okay, keep rolling. Homestead 8, the only issue there was the request to establish a development envelope for an on-site wastewater treatment system, and staff at the time had commented that we were concerned about just establishing an envelope without having sort of more detail on the system that was needed to serve the house, to make sure that what we were doing, served the need. And they did provide that information, and it's 100 feet back from the creek, at least 100 feet, and it's sized to accommodate the system for the residents that is to be built on Homestead 8. So we supported that request. Change on Homestead 9, they had originally asked to put the on-site wastewater treatment system for the work cook parcel on Homestead 9. We'd raised some concerns about that as well, and they've just withdrawn that request to put that septic system on Homestead 9. They've also agreed to increase the setback from Dry Woody Creek from 20 to 50 feet on Homestead 9. I think that was something that was discussed out on the site visit. And we've supported that request. The work cook parcel is right up here. This is where the Red Canyon drops out onto the property. There's previously was approved an envelope in this location that was permitted to develop up to 8,250 square feet. They were asking to basically re-up that approval. So you have the Red Canyon coming out, and then Dry Woody Creek also coming through here. The applicant has now committed to permanently deed restrict the work cook parcel against residential development if the county agrees to discontinue use of certain trail segments, and that I'll let the applicants get into the details on that. I think we identified all of the constraints when we discussed this parcel at the last meeting, primary one being wildlife habitat in the proximity to the property. There were other constraints that could be avoided, including rockfall, alluvial fan, and floodplain, and the 100-foot setbacks from both Red Canyon and Dry Woody Creek. When you draw your envelope based on all of those constraints, it's fairly limited in size. From a wildlife perspective, Kevin Wright with Colorado Parks and Wildlife had agreed previously that the proposed envelope was in the best location possible, but that development on this parcel would clearly impact wildlife. So staff obviously is supportive of sterilization of this parcel. It does have a lot of constraints affecting it, but we'll obviously defer the question of whether that's an appropriate trade-off for the trail issues to you, to your discretion. So, and that takes us to the last piece of this, which is the trail proposal. Again, I think I'll just let Glenn discuss their exact proposal in terms of the changes to that 2011 trail easement. Let's see. Anyway, I think I'll let Glenn cover that issue for you as well. That is within your discretion.
Questions to staff at this point?
Well,
George?
For Glenn, when you do your presentation, just because it ties in with Suzanne, what you just said, regarding the trail relocation, on the trail proposal, the memo says that applicant is requesting to eliminate and instead to provide a trail on a hillside. So my question is, when you say provide, does that mean you're actually going to establish and create the trail, or are you just providing the location? So,
Michael?
John, can you give us some historical background on the origins of this trail and how it came into being?
Well, that is a tale. It goes back to the original, I would say the original homestead of the property by 3 different individuals, I believe. The property was serviced by a road that was established and built at that time, and then became a county right-of-way. The trail itself was disputed, or the road was disputed, and consequently the trail use was disputed. To cut to the quick, so to speak, 2011, the county and the...
So let me ask you, John. So how long has the road that belonged to the county, how long has that been in existence?
Since the homestead, which was done in the late 1880s, I believe.
So it's been in existence for 120 years plus, is that what you're saying?
Right, and with a disputed relocation of and change in alignment.
And that occurred over time at some unknown point?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
At any rate, the current trail easement is a result of a compromise and settlement that was effected between the property owner and the BOCC in 2000.
Which property owner, John?
Well, the predecessor in interest, I believe, if not the twice removed predecessor, in the BOCC, and that established the sort of twin alignment that is described on the exhibit in front of the board, that provided for an alternative path depending on the seasons and presence of wildlife on the hillside. And theoretically lined up with the old roadway alignment, which in the old days extended up Red Canyon.
The county road did?
Yeah, the status, like I said, was disputed. The county asserted that there was a road established up there.
Thank you.
Additional questions of staff at this time? Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Suzanne, I'm going to try and test your memory here, given that we have our current resolution based on past resolutions and past approvals. What restriction would there be, if any, on using the new agricultural facility for nonprofit fundraising events?
I don't think we have any, I don't think we put any language in the approvals restricting that. Did we do that here?
There was a restriction, if I recall, in the last approval regarding the use of the ranch house, the clubhouse,
right,
for events. There were never there was never a contemplation of using the agricultural structures for fundraising events, but there was something about the ranch house. And as far as I see it, these agricultural buildings would not be permissible to be used, for community events because they're agricultural buildings. And I think that the regular code would come into play if someone wanted to have an event in one of these agricultural buildings. I just don't see that it's permitted under the code. Might have to be a special event review.
So, yeah, there was a condition in the 2008 approval for the ranch house specifically. Shall be used only for events hosted by the association or individual homeowners. Shall not be used for commercial or other public events, including benefits. So that's just specific to the ranch house.
Okay. You know, I can't help but think that we may want to consider that for the ag facility or some limitation. I'm not saying that it should never be, but we've seen that with the larger Aspen Valley Downs property ranch that caused considerable concern with the neighbors, that it wasn't really intended to be a every other week fundraiser location. And I'm not sure exactly how best to deal with it in this, but I think that that's important, and especially considering kind of what we are seeing going on right now in Little Annie's, that we haven't even begun to address codes to try not to infringe on anyone's private property rights and rights to use. At the same time, an event that attracts 500 people, just because it's a private party, you shouldn't be able to just have whatever traffic impacts or these sort of things on its neighbors. So I'm just trying to be a little cautious and think about what we could put in this approval that would maintain some sound footing.
Steve?
Responding to that, Rachel, I have been to 2 different events that I remember, one being a square dance and community picnic in a hay barn.
Yeah.
Another being just a general reception. Actually, can think of another one now. It's on 3 different properties using the hay barn as a facility for when there's not hay in it before the haying season. And I would think if we could put it in wording in here that any such event would have to receive a special use permit. And at that time, then we could decide whether, if it's appropriate to use whatever building they propose at that time.
That's a good suggestion, and maybe when we wrap up, we can go back over some of these and see what board consensus is. So I just wanted to make sure we don't find ourselves in the same situation saying, boy, by the way, we have zero control over this and it's going to impact the neighbors severely.
Okay. Any other questions for staff at this time? Ryan, would you like to take it away?
Okay, thank you very much. For the record, my name is Glenn Horn. I represent the Suki family, the owners of Aspen Valley Ranch. You recall you've met already Kareem Suki, who's here, and Chris Suki. Other representatives that are here are Brooke Peterson, who's in charge of the ranch. Once again, Sharif Suki, the father, who's really the one that has the ultimate say about the ranch, is not here. Kareem and Chris intend to live on the ranch with their sister Lena on 3 of the lots. We also have Charlie Keys is here. Charlie's the landscape architect and site planner from DHM. You know Jonathan Losky, wildlife biologist, as well, and also Tom Newland, who's helping us with all of the site construction and permitting. We want to thank you for coming on the site visit. I think it was informative and helped us as well as you understand what's going on in the ranch. Suzanne summarized the changes to the plan fairly well. I'll try to touch upon some of the issues that she did not touch upon and pick up on the questions that you've raised. With respect to Homestead 1, the clustering of these agricultural buildings, the buildings were moved to this location because of the debris flow issue that affected the agricultural facilities parcel. In addition to that, with respect to the debris flow, the code is fairly clear that if you can avoid a debris flow hazard, when you can, you should. So rather than mitigating for the debris flow hazard on the agricultural facilities parcel, the owners chose to relocate the equipment, it's called the mechanical equipment barn, and the hay barn to the agricultural, to the Homestead one in the location that you saw. We had the story poles up there. In the course of that, we found out, which was good when we put up those story poles, that there was a ridgeline issue that we never expected, where one of the flanks of Triangle Peak was broken by the ridge of the equipment barn. So that equipment barn has been shifted 45 feet to the west, and we have a drawing of it, and it's not, I can show it to you, but it's just a shift 45 feet. And we tested that with the story poles, and there is no ridgeline break anymore, and it works well. As a matter of fact, it's probably a little less visible there, and that in combination with the landscaping that's proposed will probably make that site function well. We think that the buildings work well there, in that people that are going to access those buildings, or service people or anyone associated with the ranch, won't have to drive through on the main ranch road to access those buildings. So even though there's a breakup of some of the facilities at the old Borg barn is on the agricultural facilities parcel, and is the horse barn, a lot of these more intensive agricultural uses, such as storing all the equipment, will take place at the entrance to the ranch, so that people won't have to drive through the ranch with the equipment. It's also more accessible to the different fields on the ranch, and that the fields are right in this area here, and the equipment and mechanical building is right here. So we think that it seems to function well. The issue that Rachel raised about the size is an interesting one. There is no plan whatsoever at this time to construct a 13,250 square foot house there. As we said, the house is going to be about 2,400 square feet in size. It will be free market, but it's going to be occupied by a ranch manager. One of the things that you ought to keep in mind is that the vesting period for the entitlement on the property lasts until 2020. So in 2020, I think, I'm not sure how we would deal with this issue of what the allotment is for that property, but all I can say is there's no intent whatsoever to develop a house of that size, and it's very valuable, but also the improvements that are being proposed on the agricultural facilities parcel, the equipment barn, the hay barn, are pretty significant. So I don't envision that those are going to be demolished in the future, but as you say, you never know what might happen. There is an issue that came up about the size of the agricultural building. It's the equipment storage building, in that a prior board, I think it goes all the way back to 2005, the original approval, limited the size of agricultural buildings to 5,000 square feet. And that recommendation, that condition has been carried forward in Suzanne's draft resolution. And the equipment storage building that's proposed on this site is sized at 6,600 square feet. And we would ask that you make a change to the condition restricting the size of that building from 5,000 to 6,600. If you take a look at your packet, attachment number 2 shows elevations of that building, which we think is an attractive building, and we're requesting that it be permitted to be 6,600 square feet in size, keeping in mind that one of the advantages of the larger building is that all the equipment in the ranch yard right there can be stored indoors, and that was the reason why that building was sized at that size, and with the intent of storing equipment indoors rather than outdoors. You want to add something to that, Brooke?
Well, Brooke Peterson, for the record. I just wanted to point out that we, in addition to the agricultural facilities, we have a requirement to continue the agricultural production on the property. And from my experience, that necessitates the equipment and it necessitates the barns. I suppose we could hire somebody to come in and do all this work and bring all their equipment in, but that's not our intent, and I think that speaks to the rather permanent nature of the barns on the property at this point in time. And, you know, as far as the concern about the size of the home, if the agricultural facilities were, the barns were done away with, I think it's somewhat impractical to think that we could maintain the agricultural use of the ranch without those barns. And therefore, it's very, very unlikely that we're ever going to do away with the barns.
And that,
Go ahead, Rachel, if you have a
just
question.
the number again was 1,600 square feet additional you need above the 5,000?
Above the 5,000. 6,600 is the size of the equipment barn. And the old restriction was set at 5,000. I can't recall that there was a lot of analysis done back in 2005 when that restriction was established, but that was the number that was carried forward, and I think that's the reason why that number appeared in this resolution of approval.
That's correct, it's just a carryover, and yeah, I think at the time when you wanted the 30,000 square foot cap, you know, I think it was just thrown out as a number to say we don't want it all in one building, we want to somehow limit it to, you know, have that broken up into multiple buildings. I don't think there was more.
Michael?
So, Glenn, the difficulty I'm having with this particular proposal is that you've bifurcated the agricultural facilities parcels. You had one parcel originally, now you have two parcels. But the second parcel is also a residential parcel. So is it an agricultural parcel, is it a residential parcel? Will it be a residential parcel in the future? That's difficult to understand. The other difficulty, of course, is that the ranch existed for the 120 years or whatever, with facilities that you see on it, and it was a productive ranch. And so now we have more buildings, less agricultural land, but for some reason we need to double, triple, whatever, our agricultural facilities to maintain production on them. I don't get that. I just don't see that that makes much sense. So those are the difficulties that I'm having with this portion of the proposal. It just doesn't, it might add up for the applicant, but it doesn't add up quite for me. So I'll let the other commissioners weigh in on that.
Well, as I said, I'll just repeat, the planning that went on for the size of those buildings was based upon the equipment that would be needed to be stored indoors rather than outdoors. And I don't know how the equipment was stored in the past, but perhaps there was a more outdoor storage of equipment, and I don't know what type of equipment they had on site versus bringing in. But that's the basis for the sizing of those buildings.
Yeah, well, it's a contradiction in modern Pickens County when you have essentially agricultural production at its possibly lowest since the inception of white man residents in this valley. And yet, for some reason, you have agricultural facilities, their sizing at their highest. So how does that, I don't understand what's going on here. I don't understand in general what's going on. I don't understand in the particular what's going on.
Fine. Steve?
I was trying to envision if there could be any other ag buildings that they might want more than 5,000. There could potentially be a hay barn that would be 50 by 120 feet long, for instance, would be more than 5,000 square feet. And I'm wondering if we should make it, word this such that no one building could exceed 5,000 square feet by right, and anything larger than that would have to go through a special review to get approved at that point. And in this case, the machine shed, if we were approving it, we could mention that specifically on that number 11 article on page 4, which is where it talks about the square footage of the buildings.
Okay, I've noted that down, and maybe we'll get to it as we get into the discussion. Glenn, if you'd like to continue with your
Just a
presentation.
comment on that. Perhaps what you may want to say is that there's a limitation in size of 5,000 square feet, but this particular building, where you've seen the plans for and everything, is approved at 6,600, but any other building would be limited to the 5,000 square feet. It's a possibility, but anyway, I understand what you're saying. With respect to the TDRs associated with the agricultural facilities parcel, I don't know the current status of which TDRs have been used. Brooke, have all the TDRs been used up from the upper ranch?
I'm not aware, I don't know the answer to the question.
So there were TDRs associated with the dry Woody Creek parcel, which is these parcels up here. There was one TDR awarded for each one of these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think that there's the 7th, 7. And those TDRs will be used on the ranch. They're still owned by the family. And then after that, the current practice has been that a property owner would make an effort to acquire TDRs within the caucus area if available. But if not, they don't want to be restricted to just that caucus area. So, we can commit to looking for TDRs as a first priority within the Woody Creek caucus area. But if those TDRs are not available at, a reasonable market price, we need to have the capability to look outside of the Woody Creek caucus area. So that's something that we can commit to do, but it needs to be reasonable in that there may not be that many TDRs available in the Woody Creek caucus area.
I got a question, actually, it may be more for John. If we're looking for TDRs outside the caucus area, you've got a commissioner here who has TDRs to sell. How does that, does he have to recuse himself? Do we have to do something within his application? Because we wouldn't want to vote for something that may, again, be in one's favor.
To the extent that it would favor those TDRs, then I think that would be a situation of recusal. But to the extent that a commissioner owns TDRs generally or property in the county, would not necessarily preclude participation.
Suzanne touched upon the height of the ranch house building in the agricultural facilities parcel, and our comment is that the floor area for that building is considered residential floor area. There isn't a primary residence on that parcel, and we would ask that the ranch house be permitted to be built to a height limit of 28 feet, which is what a residence would be allowed. And it would, in a sense, function as the primary structure there. And I think the key issue is the one that Suzanne touched upon, in that Susanna Reed has commented on whether or not a building of that height would be appropriate given its proximity to the Borg barn and the Borg homestead. And she doesn't have an objection to that ranch house being designed and built at a 28-foot height limit. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's very far away from any county road. It doesn't break a ridge line, and it's set against the backdrop of the flank of Triangle Mountain. So I don't think there's going to be any visual adverse impact from that building being constructed at 28 feet. So I think I tried to touch upon what I think were the questions that were asked with respect to the presentation that Suzanne made up to this point. And now what I wanted to do is turn the focus to the trail discussion. And before I do that, I had one comment on the comments that John was making with regards to how the trail got created. And I think everything that he said was accurate, but I just wanted to clarify one thing. Back in 2005, when the property was controlled by an LLC that was controlled by a guy named Seymour Seversky, they were the first ones that contracted to acquire the property. It was that group that granted the trail easement over the Aspen Valley Ranch Road for public access to Red Canyon. And that was done because they thought it would be attractive to the Woody Creek community and Pitkin County in general to create public access to the Red Canyon public lands. At that time, the owners weren't aware, and I don't think the county was aware, of the old public right-of-way that went through the ranch. And that came up later on when the subsequent owners came in. There was comments about an old public road being there. But it was the prior owners that had granted that easement on the road without any knowledge of the fact that there was a public right-of-way. So that's a minor clarification. But I think the point is that John's making and Michael's addressing is that there is this old, well, it wasn't platted, but there was a public access across the ranch, and there was an old map of it, and that led to a dispute between the property owners over access on that old right-of-way, and that is what led to the settlement agreement and the trails plan that we're going to start to discuss right now. So that's just a clarification. With respect to the trail issue, I don't think there's any dispute whatsoever, and there's no objection on the part of the current owners that there needs to be public access to the public lands. And there's an agreement as to what that access is, and that's not really in dispute whatsoever. And the family, the Suki family, wants to see the public access, and really this discussion is about where the public access is going to be and how can it be managed so that it works for a desirable trail experience for the public, and also have a desirable situation for the Suki family. So I don't think there's any question about that. With respect to wildlife habitat and the presentation by Kevin Wright at the last meeting and also by Jonathan Losky, I don't think there's any dispute over the fact that there's significant wildlife habitat and critical wildlife habitat and winter range that should be protected. And you heard from Kevin that there probably shouldn't be public access during certain times when there's critical, when the animals are in distress in the wintertime and they need that winter range. Now, the county has adopted land use policies that address trail access, access to public lands, and also wildlife habitat. And like a lot of county land use policies, there are conflicts between the concept of protecting the wildlife habitat and having public access during certain times of the year. So as the Board of County Commissioners, you're charged with sorting out these conflicting policies and coming up with a land use plan for this property that works both for the public as well as the wildlife habitat. We're proposing a plan that balances these conflicting policies, and that's what we want to discuss with you today in terms of coming up with a plan that works for the wildlife habitat and also works for the general public and provides a valuable trails experience. So if you take a look at this drawing right here, this is the approved trail alignment. This is what the agreement is. Before we had a drawing up here with dashed lines and different trail segments, and I thought it was rather confusing, and Brooke thought it was really confusing. So we're trying to simplify this, and the best way to do that is to use several drawings. But what you have here is the approved trail alignment, and it isn't built yet, but there are segments of it that exist. It starts over here at a parking area that was dedicated as part of that settlement agreement by the owners that would go across this red trail across West Ranch over to the main road on this red segment, which is segment A. And then it goes down this main road, which is the entrance to the ranch, until it gets to this point right here. And at this point is where the purple trail begins. And this is where you get off the road and start the trail experience above the fields in a very desirable place. This trail in purple has been laid out by Gary Tannenbaum, and it's designed with grades that are less than 8%. It's very desirable. It goes through a very attractive area. And just to give you an idea of what an 8% grade is like, the new trail on Sky Mountain Ranch, the Airline Trail, the Cozy Line Trail are all designed at less than 8% because that's a desirable grade that's acceptable for trail design. So this purple section of trail would be closed in the wintertime because of the impact on wildlife habitat. The idea being that you would have this green section of trail that would be available year-round so that people could access through the Work Cook parcel, which is on this purple segment, to the Red Canyon Trail. And you got to keep in mind and remember what comments you heard from Kevin Wright about accessing this area during the wintertime is very undesirable for the animals. Okay, so here, this is the trail proposal that that the applicant is proposing here. And it starts in the same spot over here at the parking lot, just like over there, goes across the West Ranch. And then when it gets on the Up Valley side of the West Ranch housing, it goes across Homestead 1 to the toe of the slope of Triangle Peak. And we worked this out with Gary. It's very desirable. It would be at the toe of the slope, but it may go behind the junipers so that it's protected from the field and has a very desirable trail experience. And when it gets over here by this ranch manager's house, it will start to climb. And it'll, as I said before, it'll climb at an 8% grade, which is a desirable trail experience. If you look at like most of the sections of Smuggler Mountain Road are less than 8%. There are some sections that are steeper, but it's not a difficult walk, and it's what you try to do with trail design. At this point, it would be up on the upper bench and would go across through the wooded area and Sage Field and come back down on the other side of the agricultural facilities parcel past the potato barn and then be on the valley floor and go up Red Canyon. And the proposal is that this trail be entirely shut down in the wintertime when there's a conflict with the deer and elk winter range. There would be no trail at all on the road in an area that would be in conflict with the cars and vehicles that travel on that road. Now, we looked at this with Tony Boone, who is the county's contractor who built the Airline Trail and the Cozy Line Trails. And he looked at the way it was laid out by Gary, and he said he could build a trail there. It would be very desirable. And George, getting to your question, provided means the agreement calls for the trail being constructed by the Suki family, the owners of the ranch. And this trail would be constructed all the way from this point to where it hits the ground at the Work Cook parcel. And we have a proposal for the trail to be on the Work Cook parcel with landscaping along the side of it to make it as desirable as possible. So with that, Tom, why don't you put up this next, put that one over this one. Okay.
Before you do that, George, Tom, before you do that,
sorry.
So on the approved trail alignment, you've got a segment in green that actually allows year-round use.
Yes.
And even though it's probably not that long a segment, but it allows year-round use. Your proposal really eliminates any possibility of year-round use.
That's correct, because you see, under this proposal here, the trail would be closed at December 1st, and it would open again on May 1st, with the idea being that it's not desirable to have public use on the sides of Triangle Peak due to the critical winter range, or in Red Canyon. So this next, yes? Yeah, oh yeah, well, okay, the next one. Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, so what we wanted to do is show you here what the trail experience would be like. Here's a photo that's taken at this point right here, and it would be the trail going by lots 2, 3, and 4, which really, you know, is on the road, and that's what the trail experience is. And we didn't have the time to go up onto this purple segment here, so you could see where what the comparable trail experience would be. But this photo here is taken right there, and this photo is taken above it on the purple trail. And you can see what it'll look like in, actually this right here, this red dot shows where Gary flagged the trail. He's flagged the entire trail. And it's really very desirable, and it goes through the sage and junipers until it comes down back to the valley floor. Then to give you an idea of what the views are like up there, we have two photos that we took. One right here, which goes across Homestead 2. And you can see this is where this photo is and what it looks like. It would be looking at this house with Shimer in the background, the side of Cozy Point here, and you know, the mountains that are up the pass. When you're up above at this location on the Purple Trail, the views are much better and wider ranging, that you're looking over the fields, over this house, up towards the pass, you know, Mount Shimer, this is Red Mountain, and you get a sense, we're just trying to give you a sense of what the trail experience would be like. In our opinion, the trail experience is far superior on the trail that's been laid out. You know, and there's a little bit of a similarity, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, is that before the airline trail was built, you would travel up to get to the Skyline Trail by going up the double track Radar Road. And, you know, it was okay, it's an okay trail experience, but you felt like the real trail experience began when you got to the top of Cozy Point at the Radar facility, and then you got on the single track, which was the Skyline Trail. So now that the airline trail has been completed, the road that would formerly take you to the Radar facility and the Skyline Trail has been closed. And the airline trail is a much better trail experience. And I don't think there have been a lot of complaints to the county about closing the old road to the Radar facility, because people are so happy about using the airline trail to get up to the Skyline Trail. I think this would be similar. You know, and there are also similar security issues in that you don't want people going by the Radar facility. It's similar for the Sukis, and they would prefer that people not walk right on the road by their houses. So what you have is a trail experience that works both for the public and also for the owners of Aspen Valley Ranch. So with that, let's take a look at what the proposal is from the Suki family for Aspen Valley Ranch. You can get rid of this picture one if you want, Tom. Keep that one there. Yeah, we'll put it over here. All right. So, this is the proposal. There'd be no winter use of the Red Canyon Trail by the public, by the owners of Aspen Valley Ranch, or their guests. And connected with that, with number 1, would be number 6, that there'd be a trail management and monitoring plan similar to what they have on the Rio Grande Trail for sections that are closed, where there would be cameras and there would be oversight to make sure that there's no use whatsoever of the Red Canyon Trail by the public or by, you know, the private individuals that live on the ranch. The most important probably of this proposal, aspect of this proposal, and it's an addition and it's very significant, is to sterilize the work cook parcel, which is a very valuable parcel. It creates a significant buffer right here between the development on the ranch and the critical habitat. Kevin Wright supports this. Jonathan has said it's a very good idea. It's a very significant commitment on the part of the Suki family for you to consider and put in place this trails plan. There would be a commitment, as I said, to build the realigned trail. That would be done by the Suki family. Right now they're committed to do this purple section of trail, but the new commitment that would come, the agreement they have with the county requires them to build the purple section of trail. So the new part of the trail would be this red portion here. And I think what you're going to see is that with this proposal, the trail experience is really going to start right at this point right here when you leave West Ranch. In that it will be desirable to walk this section of trail alone and perhaps turn around and go back. It will be a desirable trail experience. People will enjoy it, and I don't even think they'll have to go to Red Canyon. If people want to go further, they certainly would be able to do that. But here you would be creating a trail experience on the property that would be quite desirable. There would be winter closure trail gates. We talked about that last time. That's something that Kevin strongly recommends. In fact, he would require it, recommends that you require it, that there would be obvious winter trail closures. The hunting season access would be expanded. Right now, in the agreement with the county, there can be no hunting, no hunters crossing the property after November 1st, which doesn't make any sense at all because the primary hunting season would go till December 1st. So there would be hunter access during the hunting season. This restriction in the agreement, which doesn't work at all from Kevin's standpoint about hunters keeping their guns in cases crossing the property, that would be removed. And there would also be a wildlife enhancement plan that was recommended by Kevin, in that he's proposing that in this purple segment of the trail that there be a bunch of juniper trees removed, not the ones right along the trail, but out in the sage field to help the sage field habitat, which would be important for the wildlife. So that's the trails proposal. We think it's a far better trails experience for the general public, and we also think that it balances out the trail experience with the need to protect the habitat. And with that, we can take questions, but that's really the extent of our presentation.
Rachel?
Thank you, Glenn. I seem to recall from our last meeting, unless there was another meeting with Kevin testifying, that he had suggested that actually a date like May 31st was more appropriate for reopening the trail than May 1st. I kind of had asked about that, and I'm just kind of wondering where that went.
I don't recall that date, but Jonathan, could you comment on that?
Jonathan Losky for the record. I'm almost certain, in my comments from Kevin, that it was May 1st because, by May 1st, those slopes are relatively southerly facing. They rarely build up any snow, with the exception being the winter of 2007, 2008. So, like right now, there are still some cows and yearlings that are coming down into the hayfield, but none of that is critical habitat at all this time of year. Most of them have moved on. Most of the cows are moving up into aspen for calving. And deer are, there's resident deer on the property, but there is no winter use. So by May 1st, in almost every winter, those the stuff up Red Canyon and up Dry Woody and across the highway is free of snow. So there's no critical or vital use of that area come May 1st. And I've never seen Kevin or anybody at CPW make a recommendation to the end of May. It's almost always April 30th or May 1st.
And that's, his letter, the letter that was in the packet for the last meeting. Trail should be physically closed to all use from December 1st through April 30th. So
Okay.
May 1st is.
I just had recalled asking him that question in the meeting, and I thought he had given us a different response, so.
Michael.
So, let me spin another story. It's a good story that you tell us, Frank. Thank you. And there's some great things about that ranch. The site visit was very instructive. The reconstruction of the homestead house, the preservation of the barn, the extra lengths that you're going to with the barn. Those were all really wonderful things to see, and the illumination of all the trailers and accumulated junk of 50 years. That was really nice to see. It was really good. But if you recall, I was with Jan Schoberlein, who is a neighbor, a landlady, and a friend of mine. And she's 80-something, right? And the parties got separated. I guess they just didn't notice that we were lagging behind. But at 80, you can't travel as well as you can when you're 50-something or 40-something or 30-something. So, but you could travel well on that road. You could travel well on the ranch road, right? Because the grade is perfect there. In fact, it's not much more than the grade of the Rio Grande Trail, which is adjacent to it. And the Rio Grande Trail shares some of the same concerns that you have on the current trail. It's the proximity to houses, and the Rio Grande Trail in that area is quite proximate to houses. And I'm sure people have security concerns, but they've come to live with it. So one of the story that I'm trying to tell is we have these preservations of this ranch, of this homestead house, these barns, potato cellar, which is all part of our heritage here as Valley residents. And our historic preservation person has made sure that we preserve those kind of structures. In most cases, nobody ever gets to see those structures because they're on private property. There isn't a trail proximate to those structures, but for the historic preservation person, the mere act of preservation is positive. But from my perspective, the access of the public to see those structures, that's more important to me, quite frankly, because it tells a story, it tells a narrative. And we had another approval in Woody Creek, which was at Don Henley's property. And it had a historic ranch house, it had historic outbuildings, a historic homestead, and then behind all of that, it had a very large new house, big house, and approved, but with the condition of preserving these older buildings. And for me, that's just part of it. Didn't conflict. It was part of the narrative of what this valley's gone through. So we've gone from log buildings, modest log buildings, agricultural practices, potatoes, cattle, barns and potato cellars, to more modern, larger, in some cases jarring change. And so the existing trail is a trail through that history, up that road, through the history of modern development, into the history of preservation of old log structures, of old barns, of old potato cellars, and then up into essentially land that is untouched. And so you travel through time in that short walk. And if you're 80 years old, or if you're a mom with a baby carriage, or you're disabled in some way, you've returned from the war, and you're not as able as a 30-year-old in good health, you can use that driveway and walk through time. So I don't have an objection to alternate trails, but I think the commissioners should consider keeping this historic trail for the very purpose of allowing people to walk through time and allow people with disabilities and less ability to use that trail, because essentially you have encapsulated on this ranch the entire agricultural history of the Roaring Fork Valley. That's why that road is there. That's why we retained it. So that's my alternate story to Glenn's story, which is Glenn's a good story. I think mine's a good story. So
let me ask you, Michael. So we're back to referring to that green section, I think, when I referred to earlier. Would you then still have a winter closure on that section? Not on, on that section?
Well, not on the road itself, but winter closure I think is up for discussion. I must say that we had a long discussion about 2 points connecting at the mouth of Red Canyon that didn't go across Red Canyon. Do you remember that? There was one point that came down from the sort of the dry woody side, and it bubbled at the edge of Red Canyon, and then another bubble took off on the other side. And Kevin himself said that there's so much snow down there that the animals don't go there. So you're not going to be in that kind of critical wildlife habitat, because the animals just don't go down into deep snow. They stay up in the shallow areas. But I'm open to a winter closure, because I've been with RAFTA, and they had a winter closure on the trail down by Catherine's Store. It's been hugely successful, and Jonathan was part of that closure. So I think that's a possibility. But I would hate to see us give up a trail. It doesn't mean we can't have an alternate trail too, but I'd hate to see us give up a trail that somebody with a disability couldn't walk up easily, and couldn't be in a wheelchair, and be disabled and still enjoy what that ranch has to offer. I appreciate the efforts of the owners to preserve that ranch, but also under the guidance of Pickens County, because we value that stuff. That's our expression of value. So that's my story.
Michael, let me ask Glenn a clarification on the approved trail alignment. The section that goes up the trail, and you've got the section that's up above on that one with the little switchback, which is closed in the wintertime. When that's open in the summertime, does that mean that the green section gets closed?
No.
So they're both open in the summertime, is the way the approved alignment is. So you have two options in the summertime with the approved option.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
make sure I was clear on
Chris
that.
Selden, I think, negotiated that particular thing, and I think the underlying thought was, if they're going to be bicyclists, you'd separate the bicyclists from people on foot, and you'd have a slightly better pattern of things. Bicyclists, for some reason, tend to be aggressive on their bikes, and it's nice to separate them as much as you can.
Additional questions, Rachel?
Yeah, Michael, you tell a very good story.
Thank you.
And, this is a very, very tough issue in a lot of ways. I guess I'd throw out there so they can begin to think about it, if the applicants might be able to consider some sort of handicapped access type of arrangement for more of a limited number of people. You've already put up a gatehouse. You're intending to maintain a gatehouse where that sort of determination could be made. And I have to think about my boyfriend's 94-year-old father and the type of treatment he's been able to get sometimes through that handicap access permit. Allowed him to go to a number of events and things like that he wouldn't have normally, and it usually includes something like having two able-bodied people with you. It's not just a single person who's handicapped you want to send out on their own on a trail. But I'd like you to consider something like that. But I need to kind of complete the story as well, Michael, that part of this discussion is the elimination of that work parcel. And we saw how critical that habitat is. It actually is the connection between two severe winter ranges, and It's not marked as winter range, as Kevin explained last time, because the snow is so deep, they often don't use it. But I can see it being an important crossing point before the snow gets that deep, and for some movements in years when we have low snow years and things like that. And to imagine whatever size house was approved there, I can't remember, it was 8,600 or 13,000 on that parcel being developed there, is extremely detrimental to both the wildlife and to future trail experience. You know, I do use the Rio Grande Trail a lot, and although I think accommodations have been made all around, it's not necessarily the best trail experience when you're going down there. You feel like you're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So, you know, I think there's other, you know, things that can round out both of these stories. It seems to be the intention of the parties to create access here, and again, maybe they just hadn't really considered that implication of handicapped individuals or individuals with children, or as you're saying. You know, I don't think the county itself built all the trails on Sky Mountain Park to be 100% ADA. I think there's areas where you're going to build trails that would require innumerable switchbacks to maintain the appropriate grade, and it's just not always done.
Yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting it always be done. I'm just suggesting we have this trail now.
Yes.
So it's in our possession now. And it's more than just a trail. As I tried to tell you, it's a journey through the history of the Roaring Fork Valley, which is, you have very modern houses, large houses, and then you have very modest houses, and you have agricultural structures. So just a trip, not all the way up to Red Canyon, but just a trip up to the agricultural lot can tell you a lot about what this country looked like that people might not get otherwise. And I understand that not all our trails are ADA, but we should consider not giving up trails that are accessible at this point and less accessible as an alternative. I think that as an alternative we'd have those trails. That'd be fine. People could choose to use them, and people might want the view up the valley that's enhanced, but other people might want to just catch a view of a log cabin, which they may have never seen in their entire lives. It's hard to believe that 100 years ago, that's where people grew up.
Thank you for extending your comments. I would come back to, I still don't believe that we can look at just one aspect of this proposal, and the elimination of that lot, it means a lot as well. The certainly better conditions related to hunting, which we've been told repeatedly by Colorado Parks and Wildlife that you know, thinning the herd appropriately is important to our herd survival. And at this point, they've gotten so many areas that are refuge areas where no hunting's allowed, that or inaccessible, that's really become a problem here. So I'm just putting out there that I see both sides of this. And I'd like, again, the applicants to think about how they might accommodate what you've discussed. But it reminds me a little bit of the conversation we hear from those who are opposed to any wilderness areas or this or that, you know, I used to go there when I was young, and so I still want to now be able to ride my ATV to that place. And there's times when you can, you know, damage the experience by trying to make it all access all the time. And there's runs I don't ski anymore either, you know. I don't expect them to groom them out flat, so I still can.
Okay, I'm going to continue here with questions of the applicant and staff, and then we'll go into public comment. Are there more questions at this time for the applicant? Steve?
It's more, I was thinking about the dates of hunting seasons and the dates of winter, and I think those should be left flexible for a couple of reasons. One, with global climate change, winter is going to get shorter and shorter, and what actually is winter that is impacting the wildlife. And right now I think we could say the date December 1st through May 1st, but in the future, in 30 years, maybe winter's only half as long as it is now, and maybe it would be appropriate to have the trail open longer. So I would leave that flexible with the dates set in by the county in consultation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Also, the provisions for hunters to go through. I looked up a couple of different hunting seasons, and there is a mountain lion hunting season that runs all winter long. There's turkey hunting season that basically runs December 15th to January 15th. The lion hunting season basically goes from November 18th through April 30th. So we traditionally think of hunting as deer or elk, but there are people who hunt different things than that. Jonathan, could you comment on that?
Wait.
Or
Yeah, I'm going to allow Jonathan to comment. I just want to say, because it's a commissioner's question directly to you, and of course we're going to have public comment for anybody else out there too, but go ahead, Jonathan. Just state your name for the record.
Jonathan Losky for the record. Kevin made it pretty clear that the priority for that area is deer and elk harvest up there. There are lions up there, there are turkeys up there, but though there's not a specific need in that area to manage those populations, whereas there's a strong desire to maintain access up into the Red Canyon dry woody area to harvest deer and elk so that they can manage those species. So that's why the closures were set to coincide with big game season rather than those other species.
okay.
So I guess a specific question that I would have for the applicant, because I thought of the same thing when we were talking about those closures. What is it 30 years from now, 50 years from now? Does the applicant have an objection to, the county managing those dates based on the benefits of the wildlife and preservation? That's what, Rachel?
But before asking them that question, to respond to Steve and that thought, I could see creating some sort of review of the closure dates so that if circumstances truly change, there could be some flexibility to change them. But one of the most important things is actually establishing some mental consistency. If, this year I was able to get on it May 1st, and next year I have to wait till the 15th, and now I can't go, and this year I can do it, it will be very difficult, and so I think that having consistency and then perhaps a review period built in for changing circumstances would make more sense than having it change annually.
Glenn?
Well, and to respond to your question, and I think Rachel has a good point as well. We talked about in the commitments on the trail, developing a trail management and monitoring plan. And so maybe that ought to be folded in, the whole idea about closures to the trail management and monitoring plan, where there's some sort of annual get-together, as you said, with Parks and Wildlife, and I'm sure Open Space and Trails would manage that. And I think there would be appropriate trailheads, signs that explain what's going on. But I think that's all something that can be worked out as part of this trail management and monitoring plan, so that if hunting season varies, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to get through here when it's hunting season. And we picked December 1st and May 1st and really weren't thinking about climate change and how that might affect hunting season. So I think that's all workable.
And I agree with what Rachel is saying, that there's some consistency to those closures, but I'm looking at something in perpetuity for forever. And in response to what Glenn just said, I guess the question lies with the trail management and monitoring plan, and I'm okay with that. The question then lies with who has the authority to make the change. Because if the landowner just doesn't want to make the change and they have the authority, well then, so that was really the question that I think Steve was raising, which is, well, what if there is a important hunt season that happens within that closure that's not going to affect wildlife? Can we open that up without the permission of the landowners because we're managing the trail or whatever? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, perhaps the habitat management plan could specifically reference I'm going to say something like a biannual review. I don't think we need it every year.
5-year review.
Or every 2, every 5, whatever. and that a final decision on changing of those dates would occur with a vote of a representative of the county, a representative of the landowner, and a representative from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Keep it simple, have a 3-person panel who can look at it and make a decision. And so, the landowner would be a part of that panel and discussion and could make the case as to why or why not things should change. And, it's that was just one thought of how you could manage who has the authority in the group.
Glenn?
Yeah, in discussions with Brooke, it's his feeling that it wouldn't be acceptable to the family to have dates that aren't set. He wants to establish some set dates. He feels that given, what's being committed to on the part of the Suki family, particularly the Work Cook parcel, there needs to be some certainty with the dates, and it wouldn't be acceptable to have, a review of it on an annual basis. Maybe something could be set up where, at the consent of the Suki family, if there is a change in the hunting season, those dates could change. But Brooke's feeling is that Sharif Suki would want absolute control over what those dates were, and it wouldn't be acceptable, to have a vote and a say with Parks and Wildlife and the county. Brooke feels strongly that there would have to be some set dates that the Suki family could control if they were to change in the future. Am I representing that right, Brooke?
Correct.
Okay.
And I guess that was my original question. You referred to the management plan, and then my question is, who had authority over the management plan? And you're saying that the management plan is of the authority of the property owners.
Well,
and that it could be input from other people, but you're saying veto power of the property owner.
No, I think the management plan is something that can be worked on collectively with Parks and Wildlife.
Okay, the management plan in regard to the closures and openings.
Yeah.
Is it the discretion of the property owners, in your opinion? That portion of the management plan, maybe not the whole management plan, but that portion of the management plan is clearly at the discretion of what I'm hearing of the property owners.
That's correct.
Well, what I hear is that it's not actually the discretion of the property owners, it's date certains that we set, and they align with hunting season, primarily elk and deer hunting season, and those are the dates.
Yeah.
They don't have the discretion after that point to change those dates.
Right.
It's what we're talking about is further flexibility in changing those dates, and the applicant has said they don't want flexibility, they want certainty. So, and I can understand that, because that's what I'd like too on this property. And so far we haven't gotten it, but maybe we will.
George?
I don't have a problem with set dates. I mean, I think we have bigger issues here to try to get through before midnight here.
Any other questions of the applicant at this time?
I just have a clarification. Glenn, is there a proposal to build bridges on the upper and lower crossings, creek crossings, or is it just as it is?
Cindy, there are no crossings that are proposed that are public crossings. There's going to be, because it's not necessary to cross the creeks. There may be a crossing on BLM property of the Red Canyon Creek when it's running, but there are no crossings that are contemplated on the private land. There is a crossing that is in the plan that would cross from the agricultural facilities parcel to Homestead 8 right here. There's an existing crossing right at this point from the ag facilities parcel to Homestead 8 that's there now.
The little bridge?
Yeah, a little bridge, and
that's the correct trail crossing?
That's not a trail crossing.
No, that's
just
not the public trail.
Yeah, no, it's just a private crossing for someone that's on the agricultural facilities parcel.
No, I mean, Cindy's
right
talking
there.
about if you were continuing up Red Canyon.
Yeah, when you go up Red Canyon on the BLM or on the Forest Service property, before that, you do have to cross the creek.
Just before the BLM land?
Are you on Work Cook at that point, or are you on?
Yeah, on Work Cook. Is there a crossing there?
Let's. Thank you. So I guess the question is, would there be a commitment to having a trail that goes all the way to the BLM border? And if there is a crossing in the Rec Cook parcel, that you would manage that as a trail, a sufficient trail. That I guess is a safe crossing,
Safe trail, safe
and not
crossing.
just some rocks that you're jumping across or something. Is that the question you're
Well,
asking?
obviously, it was on the wrong trail.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions of the applicant at this time?
Just
Steve?
a real brief one, Glenn, on this map of the trails, there's a little short yellow segment that says winter option. It doesn't show up on these, and could you explain, maybe that's from one of the original plans or something?
Actually, we've got that drawing. We can show it to you.
You want it?
Yeah, let's put that up there. And this, in the event that the applicant's proposed trail is unacceptable, this is essentially our backup plan, which would be to build this trail to here, and then have a winter access here at this point that would cut down to the road for the winter option. So this is our fallback position in the event that our proposal is unacceptable, that we would suggest that you put this trails plan in place where there would be this winter option here on the road, and there would be a connection from this red segment of the trail behind the ranch manager's house to the road. And one of the things that I failed to mention is the instructions that we have from the Suki family are this. We've made the best proposal that we can make with respect to the trails. This isn't like, an end-all issue for the Suki family. We feel that this is in the best interest of the family and the public with our proposal for the trails. But, we don't want to sit here and, discuss it for hours. If the proposal doesn't work, we would be happy to go with what we've put in the application and this backup proposal right here, which is the applicant's proposed winter alignment, if our trails proposal is unacceptable to you, because, we can just move forward with the rest of the application.
Glenn, is it my understanding that that would not include the sterilization of the rec parcel?
With the work cook parcel, yeah, that's
cook
correct.
parcel.
So, but we would still, have the commitment to build this segment of the trail and have this winter connection, but the work cook proposal wouldn't be on the table, as well as everything that we have on this board would be off the table, because there is a trails agreement. And that's really what our commitment is, and the instructions that we had from Sharif Suki.
So, I'm sorry, Glenn, I don't understand. Everything, you said everything would be off the table. What do you mean by off the table?
With this Aspen Valley Ranch trail proposal, our trail proposal, these commitments, 1 through 9, would no longer be up for discussion.
The trail proposals?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything else would be part of the proposal. What Sharif doesn't want to do is have this discussion go on and on and on. He's willing to, go with what the staff has proposed in this resolution, with the discussions that we've had, with the exception of the trail. And, work cook would be something that would come back, but we could move forward with the approval as suggested by Suzanne in the resolution.
Rachel?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Glenn, but I see this as a package. And, I would begin reconsideration all over if we were talking about we're not making any of the corrections or improvements or enhancements to the trail that are appropriate for wildlife management and for the work cook parcel. There's a lot of ask in this that's separate from the trail. And, to start taking it apart, I'd rather just vote this up or down and then move on from there and let you guys deal with it that way. But I'm not going to sit here at the table and say, well, by the way, we could take this part out and still do that part and do this part over here later. We'll talk. No. As I said, some surety is really what I'm looking for at the end of the day with this. And